My phone screen isn't just lighting up, it is seizing on the cold marble. 155 missed calls. Not 15. 155. That number represents the sheer panic of a predator realizing the prey has bitten back. 10 minutes ago, he texted me not to call, I replied, telling him not to come home. Now, the security feed shows him standing at our door with a crowbar, realizing his own trap has finally snapped shut. My name is Hazel Ravenswood, and I was currently standing in the center of a kitchen that was designed to be photographed rather than lived in. The open-plan space of our villa in Viridia Bay was a testament to modern architectural coldness, all sharp angles, polished concrete, and surfaces so gleaming they felt accusatory. It was the 7th anniversary of the day I signed a contract that the state called a marriage certificate, but which I was beginning to suspect was actually a liability waiver. The silence in the house was heavy, pressing against my eardrums like deep water. I had prepared a dinner that could have graced the cover of a culinary magazine, a rack of lamb with a herb crust that had taken me 2 hours to perfect, accompanied by a bottle of vintage Cabernet that cost $300. It sat on the center of the dining table, breathing, waiting for a guest who was currently 400 miles away, or at least, that was the narrative Silas had sold me. Silas Sterling, my husband, was an architect. He was a man who built glass houses both metaphorically and literally. He had kissed me on the forehead this morning, his eyes crinkling with that boyish charm that had disarmed me 7 years ago, and told me that the Zenith project in the East Coast required his immediate presence. He claimed it was the deal that would finally put his firm in the black, the deal that would erase the mountains of debt he thought I did not know about. I knew about every cent. As the director of financial risk analysis at Obsidian Dynamics, knowing things was my currency, I knew about the credit lines he had maxed out to maintain the illusion of his success. I knew about the slush fund account he kept, which I dutifully ignored to preserve his fragile ego. I allowed him his secrets because I believed they were the harmless armor of a man trying to be worthy of his wife. I was the breadwinner, the steady hand, the silent fixer of leaks in our financial vessel. I thought I was being a supportive partner. In reality, I was simply financing my own betrayal. The digital clock on the oven flickered to 8 o'clock in the evening. The house was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I was not angry. I was not even sad. I was simply waiting, though I was not sure what for. Perhaps I was waiting for the inevitable FaceTime call where he would show me a generic hotel room wall and apologize for missing our night. I took a sip of the wine. It was rich, full-bodied, and tasted like iron. Then, the glitch happened. My phone, resting on the cold expanse of the marble island, buzzed. It was a single, aggressive vibration that rattled the silverware I had laid out for one. The screen lit up with Silas's name. I reached for it, expecting a cancellation of our digital date, or perhaps a request for me to transfer more funds into the joint account for unexpected business expenses. Instead, I read a message that froze the blood in my veins. "Don't call me. I'm busy closing the deal. You are suffocating me." I stared at the words. The font seemed to float above the glass. "Don't call me." I frowned. My thumb hovered over the screen. I scrolled up. The last message in our thread was from 8 in the morning. "Good luck today. Love you." I had not called him. I had not texted him. I had not sent an email. I had been in meetings at Obsidian Dynamics for 9 hours. Dissecting data breaches for Fortune 500 companies, I had been completely silent. The message was not a response to me. It was a response to someone else. It was a reflex, a snap of irritation directed at a nagging lover, sent to the wrong contact in a moment of haste. For a normal woman, this might have been the moment of emotional collapse. Tears, denial, the frantic dialing of his number to demand an explanation. But I am not a normal woman. I am a creature of logic, algorithms, and probability. When a system throws an error, you do not cry at the screen. You run a diagnostic. I placed the wine glass down with precise, deliberate care. The stem made a sharp click against the marble. "Closing the deal," I whispered to the empty room. I unlocked my phone and bypassed the call log. I opened the Obsidian Connect application. It was a proprietary piece of software my company developed, linked to the high-end smart car I had bought for Silas 6 months ago as a birthday gift. He loved the car for its leather seats and horsepower. I loved it for its telemetry. I tapped the Locate Vehicle icon. The map loaded, the blue dot pulsating gently. If Silas was on the East Coast for the Zenith project, the car should be parked in the long-term lot at Veridia International Airport, roughly 40 miles north. The blue dot was not at the airport. The blue dot was stationary at the Sapphire Dunes Resort and Spa. It was exactly 20 miles south of our driveway. I zoomed in. The satellite view was crisp. I could see the outline of the vehicle parked in the VIP section, right next to the guest bungalows. He had not flown anywhere. He had driven 20 minutes down the coast to spend our anniversary with someone who was apparently suffocating him. The lie did not hurt. That was the strangest part. The lie felt like clarity. It was a variable that finally solved the equation. The late nights, the unexplained expenses, the emotional distance disguised as work stress, it all aligned perfectly. The anomaly was resolved. I looked at the text message again. "You are suffocating me." My fingers moved across the keyboard. I did not tremble. My heartbeat did not accelerate. If anything, it slowed down, becoming a heavy rhythmic thudding like a war drum. I typed out a reply that would cost him more than any lawsuit. "I'm not your wife anymore. Don't come home." I hit send. Immediately. I switched apps. I opened the Smart Home Manager. This system controlled everything in our Veridia Bay villa, from the thermostat to the security bolts. Silas, being an architect, loved the integration. He loved that he could unlock the front door with his phone. He forgot that I was the one who set the admin privileges. I navigated to the Access Control tab. I selected the front gate and the main entry door. I tapped Reset Passcode. I entered a new string of numbers. A random sequence that had nothing to do with birthdays or anniversaries. I confirmed the change. Then, I revoked Silas's digital key. I watched his user icon turn gray on the screen. Access denied. Then, I waited. The silence returned. But now it was charged with electricity. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. He would be reading the text now. He would be laughing. Perhaps thinking it was a joke. Or a drunk text. 10, 11, 12. He would realize the tone was wrong. He would sense the finality in the syntax. 20, 21. He would be scrambling to leave the room, pulling on his pants, telling whoever was with him that there was an emergency. 30, 31. He would be getting into the car. He would try to call. 40 seconds. The phone on the table erupted. It was not a text this time. It was a call. Silas Sterling. I did not answer. I did not decline. I simply watched the name flash on the screen, illuminating the darkened kitchen with its desperate plea for attention. The ringing stopped, then started again instantly. I picked up the wine glass and walked into the living room. I sat down on the white leather sofa, crossing my legs. I placed the phone on the coffee table in front of me. Screen up, ring, silence, ring, silence. I took a sip of wine. The flavor had improved. It tasted like power. 1 missed call, 2 missed calls, 5 missed calls. He was panic dialing. This was the reaction of a man who realized his financial lifeline had just been severed. Silas was not calling to save our marriage. He was calling to save his lifestyle. He was calling to save the reputation of the doting husband, the architect of a perfect life. 10 missed calls, 20. I imagined him in the car, speeding down the coastal highway, sweating, cursing, punching the steering wheel. He would be terrified, not of losing me, Hazel the woman, but of losing Hazel the director, Hazel the bank account, Hazel the shield that stood between him and the ruin he deserved. 50 missed calls. I watched the notifications stack up. It was fascinating data. The frequency of the calls suggested manic desperation. He was not taking time to leave voicemails. He was hitting redial the second the line cut off. 100 missed calls. It had been 7 minutes. I looked at the security camera feed on my iPad. propped up next to the phone. The driveway was empty, bathed in the soft glow of the perimeter lights. The iron gates were shut tight. 130 missed calls. I finished the glass of wine. I felt a strange sensation in the back of my skull. It was a physical shifting, a mechanical engagement of gears. It was a feeling I usually only experienced when I was deep in the server logs at Obsidian Dynamics, hunting a hacker who thought they were invisible. It was the click. My emotions, grief, betrayal, shock were being sequestered. They were being shoved into a mental containment unit, sealed behind blast doors. In their place, a cold, crystalline clarity took over. This was no longer a marriage. This was a hostile negotiation. This was a security breach. And I was the head of security. 155 missed calls. It had been exactly 10 minutes. The phone finally stopped ringing. The screen went dark for a split second. Then, the iPad screen flickered. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness at the bottom of the driveway. The engine roar of the smart car I had paid for echoed through the external microphones. Silas was home. I stood up and smoothed the skirt of my dress. I walked to the wall-mounted console that controlled the internal lighting. I did not turn on the warm, welcoming foyer lights. I activated the perimeter flood mode. Outside, the world turned stark white as the high-intensity security halogens blasted the driveway. On the screen, I saw him. He threw the car door open. He did not look like the suave architect who had kissed me goodbye this morning. He looked like a wild animal. He was wearing golf clothes, a polo shirt, and slacks, not the business suit he had left in. There was a frantic energy in his movements as he sprinted toward the front gate. He reached for the keypad. I watched him punch in the old code. Nothing happened. The red light on the panel blinked once. Denied. He punched it in again. Harder this time. Denied. He grabbed the iron bars of the gate and shook them, screaming something that the wind carried away before the microphone could catch it. Then, he looked up at the camera. I saw his face clearly on the high-definition feed. His eyes were wide, rimmed with the white-hot panic of a man who knows he has been caught, but there was no sorrow there. There was only rage. He abandoned the gate and ran toward the pedestrian side entrance, the one that led to the service path. He must have jumped the lower fence there, because a moment later, he appeared at the heavy oak front door. He didn't knock. He didn't ring the bell. He threw his shoulder against the wood. I stood in the foyer, watching the door shudder in its frame. The deadbolt held firm. "Hazel." His voice came through the wood, muffled but distinct. "Open this goddamn door. The system is broken. Open it." I didn't answer. I checked the time. 8:20 in the evening. "Hazel, I know you're in there." He was losing control. The facade of the polished gentleman was crumbling, revealing the rot underneath. I walked to the door, staying well out of the line of sight of the side windows. I activated the intercom. "The system isn't broken." "Silas," I said, my voice calm, modulated, professional. "It's working exactly as intended." "What the hell are you talking about?" he screamed. "Let me in. I was at a meeting. The deal went long. Why did you change the code?" "The GPS says you were at the Sapphire Dunes," I stated. It was a statement of fact, devoid of accusation. Unless the deal was being closed in a bungalow 20 miles away. Silence on the other side of the door. A heavy, suffocating pause. Then, the pounding resumed, violent and rhythmic. "You're crazy," he shouted. "You're tracking me. You paranoid bitch. Open the door or I'll break it down." I looked at the camera feed again. He had stopped using his shoulder. He had stepped back and picked up something from the garden bed. It was a crowbar, one of the tools the landscapers had left behind earlier that day. He wasn't holding it like a tool. He was holding it like a weapon. I watched him raise the crowbar. The metal glinted under the floodlights. I did not flinch. The click in my brain was fully engaged. I was in hyperfocus. I was no longer a wife watching her husband come home. I was an analyst watching a threat vector escalate. I picked up my phone again. I did not call my mother. I did not call my best friend. I tapped the emergency icon on the Obsidian Dynamics security app. "Dispatching local authorities," the automated voice whispered. I watched the screen as Silas swung the crowbar at the beautiful oak door he had designed himself. Splinters flew. He was destroying his own creation. Blinded by the arrogance that he could always build it back again. He was wrong. Some things, once broken, remain broken forever. I waited for the sirens. The siege had begun. The sound of the crowbar connecting with the oak was not a thud. It was a sickening crack, the sound of something organic and strong giving way to brute, metallic force. The vibration traveled through the floorboards of the foyer and up through the soles of my feet, but I did not step back. I stood rooted to the spot, my eyes fixed on the high-definition tablet screen mounted on the wall. Silas was not just knocking, he was trying to breach the perimeter. I zoomed in on the live feed. The floodlights I had activated washed him in a harsh, clinical white glare, stripping away any shadows he could hide behind. In the unforgiving light, the reality of his business trip was laid bare. He was not wearing the charcoal Italian suit he had donned this morning to close the deal. He was wearing a sky blue performance polo shirt and breathable beige slacks. He was dressed for 18 holes of leisure, not a boardroom negotiation, and there, stark against the collar of that expensive golf shirt, was a smear. It was a shade of crimson that I did not own. I preferred matte neutrals. This was a glossy, cherry-red stain of infidelity. He swung the crowbar again. "Hazel, open the goddamn door!" he screamed. His voice cracked. It was not the command of a patriarch. It was the shrill cry of a child who had been locked out of the playground. "I live here. You can't lock me out of my own house." He was wrong. I could, and I just had. He jammed the curved end of the crowbar into the seam between the double doors and heaved. The wood groaned. He was going to destroy the entrance rather than admit defeat. He was so used to getting his way, so accustomed to the world bending to his charm, that the concept of a closed door was physiologically impossible for him to process. I tapped the screen, navigating to the Obsidian Dynamics security interface. The panic mode icon sat in the center, a red circle that I had programmed myself but never thought I would use against my own husband. I pressed it. The reaction was instantaneous. The ambient lighting in the house was cut out, replaced by emergency red floor runners. Outside, the silent alarm became audible. It was not a rhythmic beep. It was a disorientation siren, a variable frequency shriek designed to incapacitate an intruder and alert law enforcement within a 3-mile radius. Simultaneously, the mechanical hum of heavy motors filled the walls. Steel shutters, painted to look like decorative trim, began to descend over every window on the ground floor. The front door, currently under assault, was reinforced by a secondary drop bar system that slammed into place with the sound of a gunshot. Silas dropped the crowbar. He covered his ears, stumbling back from the noise. The house he thought he owned had just transformed into a fortress, and he was on the wrong side of the wall. I watched him mouth words that were swallowed by the siren. He looked up at the camera, his face twisted not in fear, but in pure, unadulterated hatred. He pointed a finger at the lens, mouthing a threat. "You are crazy." 2 minutes later, the blue and red lights of the Viridia Bay Police Department swept across the driveway, mixing with the stark white security floods to create a chaotic, strobing nightmare. The automated system cut the siren the moment the patrol car sensors were detected. The silence that followed was ringing and absolute. I watched 2 officers step out of the cruiser. They had their hands on their holsters. Silas immediately changed. It was a transformation so fluid it was almost impressive. The rage evaporated from his face, replaced by a look of bewildered concern. He held his hands up, palms open, the universal gesture of the harmless victim. He walked toward the officers, shaking his head, pointing at the house, then tapping his temple. I knew exactly what he was saying. "She is hysterical. She is off her meds. I just came home from work and she locked me out." It was time to make my appearance. I walked up the floating staircase to the master bedroom balcony. It overlooked the driveway, giving me the high ground both strategically and metaphorically. I smoothed my hair, checked my reflection in the hallway mirror calm, composed. professional, and stepped out into the night air. "Officer," Silas shouted as he saw me. "There she is." "Hazel? Honey, please tell them this is a mistake. You're having an episode." The lead officer, a tall man with a weary face, looked up at me. He saw a woman standing perfectly still, dressed in an elegant evening gown, holding an iPad like a shield. He did not see a hysteric. He saw a homeowner. "Ma'am," the officer called out, "we received an automated distress signal from this address. Is everything all right?" "No, officer," I said. My voice was projected clearly, steady and devoid of tremors. "I activated the alarm because there is an intruder attempting to break into my home with a weapon." "Intruder?" Silas laughed, a breathless, incredulous sound. "Officer, I am her husband. I live here. Look, my car is right there. I forgot my keys, and she's been under a lot of stress lately." She snapped. The officer looked at Silas, then back at me. "Ma'am, he says he lives here." "He did," I replied, "until 10 minutes ago when he threatened my safety." "I never threatened you," Silas roared, the mask slipping for a fraction of a second. "I was trying to get into my own house." "Officer," I said, ignoring Silas completely, "I am sending a video file to your dispatch tablet right now. It was recorded 3 minutes ago." I tapped the screen of my iPad. The file transfer was immediate. The second officer, who was holding a ruggedized tablet, looked down. I watched from the balcony as he played the footage, the high-definition video of Silas screaming, his face contorted in violence, swinging a heavy iron crowbar at the door, played out in the silence of the driveway. The audio was crisp. "Open this goddamn door or I'll break it down." The mood shifted. The officers were no longer looking at a concerned husband. They were looking at a domestic disturbance suspect with a weapon. "Sir," the lead officer said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming authoritative, "step away from the house." "You can't be serious," Silas sputtered. "That video I was frustrated. She changed the codes." "Sir, step away from the house now," the officer repeated, his hand moving closer to his belt. "We have video evidence of you attempting to force entry with a weapon. It's my house." "Not tonight it isn't," the officer said. "We are initiating a civil standby. You need to leave the premises immediately to de-escalate the situation. You can contact your wife through legal channels tomorrow." Silas stood frozen. He looked at the cops. Then he looked up at me. The distance between us was only 20 feet of vertical space, but it might as well have been an ocean. He saw the coldness in my eyes. He realized that the charm, the smile, the good guy routine that had worked on everyone for 36 years had just bounced off me like a pebble against a tank. He lowered his hands. The defeat was temporary. I knew. He was already calculating his next move. "Fine," Silas spat. He turned to walk to his car, then stopped and looked up one last time. His eyes were dark, 2 pits of malice under the security lights. "You think you're smart, Hazel," he hissed, loud enough for me to hear, but quiet enough that the officers, who were radioing dispatch, might miss it. "You have no idea what you just started. You will regret declaring war on me." "I didn't declare war." "Silas," I replied softly, though I knew he couldn't hear me. "I just accepted your invitation." He got into the smart car. He revved the engine aggressively, a final act of teenage rebellion, and reversed down the driveway, tires screeching on the asphalt. The police officers lingered for a moment. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges for the attempted break-in?" the lead officer asked. "Not tonight, officer," I said. "I just want to be safe. Thank you for your assistance." They nodded and returned to their cruiser. I waited until their taillights disappeared around the bend of the coastal road. Then, I turned around and walked back into the bedroom. The adrenaline was starting to fade, threatening to leave me shaking, but I forced it back. There was no time for the crash. The siege had been repelled, but the invasion was just beginning. I picked up my phone. My fingers flew across the contact list to Beatrix Vale, Trixie. She picked up on the first ring. Background noise suggested she was at a jazz bar. likely nursing a scotch and terrorizing a junior associate. Hazel. Her voice was sharp, instantly alert. It's 8:30 on your anniversary. Why are you calling me? Did Silas choke on the lamb? Silas is gone, I said. I kicked him out. The line went silent for one heartbeat. Then, the background noise vanished, as if Trixie had stepped into a soundproof booth. Give me the headline, she commanded. Cheating? Confirmed. He tried to break down the door with a crowbar. Police were here. I have a video. Are you safe? Yes. Obsidian Protocol is active. Good, Trixie said. I could hear the smile in her voice, a predatory sound that was terrifying if you were on the wrong side of it. What do you want to do? Counseling mediation. No, I said. I want you to activate the Destructive Separation Protocol. Trixie let out a low whistle. Scorched earth, my favorite flavor. You know that once we pull that lever, there is no going back. Hazel, we are talking about forensic accounting, freezing assets, and the works. He told me I would regret declaring war, I said, walking into my home office and sitting down at my desk. I want to make sure he doesn't have the resources to fight a skirmish, let alone a war. I'll have the papers drafted by sunrise, Trixie promised. Don't sleep. Change your passwords. Way ahead of you. I hung up and opened my laptop. The screen glowed with the familiar blue logo of Obsidian Dynamics. Silas was an architect. He understood physical structures. He understood load-bearing walls and tensile strength. But he did not understand the data. He thought that because he had left the house, he was safe. He thought he could drive to a hotel, log into his accounts, and move money before I could touch it. He was operating on human time. I was operating on machine time. I cracked my knuckles and opened the terminal. We shared a cloud ecosystem. It was convenient for household management, shared photo albums, shared grocery lists, shared document folders for tax purposes. We also had a shared drive where he kept his architectural drafts, and I kept my household budget spreadsheets. But Silas, in his arrogance, had made a fatal error. He used the same password for everything. Zenith 2020, the name of his big project and the year he thought he would become a millionaire. I typed it in. Access granted. I was in. I didn't go for the bank accounts first. That was too obvious. I went for the folders he had marked private and archived. I needed to know the extent of the rot before I cut it out. My cursor hovered over a folder named miscellaneous_drafts. It had been modified 3 hours ago. I opened it. It wasn't architectural drawings. It was a series of PDF files, loan applications, dozens of them. Some were rejected, but many were approved. I scanned the numbers. $50,000 here, $20,000 there. And then I saw the names on the applications. They weren't in his name. They were in mine. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He hadn't just cheated on me with a woman. He had been cheating on me with my own identity. He had been leveraging my credit score, my perfect financial history, to fund a life I knew nothing about. I checked the timestamps. He had been doing this for 2 years. I downloaded everything, every file, every receipt, every fraudulent signature. I moved them to an encrypted external drive that was air-gapped from the network. Then, I went to the settings of the cloud account. Change password. I entered a 64-character string of random alphanumeric chaos. Log out all other devices. I hit enter, somewhere. In a car speeding away or in a hotel lobby. Silas's phone would go dark. His access to the photos, the documents, the evidence, all of it was gone. The siege was over. The occupation had begun, and I had just captured the first prisoner his digital life. The server room at Obsidian Dynamics was kept at a constant temperature of 65 degrees Fahrenheit. It was a climate designed for machines, not people. But on the morning after my marriage disintegrated, I found the chill comforting. It numbed the edges of the shock that was still trying to claw its way into my system. I had arrived at the office at 5 a.m, long before the janitorial staff or the early risers. I sat in my corner office, the glass walls overlooking the sleeping skyline of Viridia Bay. On my desk, stripped of its usual neat arrangement of risk assessment reports, lay the corpse of my husband's digital history. It was an old tablet, a model from 3 years ago that Silas had discarded because the screen had a hairline fracture. He had thrown it in a junk drawer in the guest room, assuming that because the battery was dead, the secrets inside were dead too. He was a fool. In my line of work, nothing is ever truly deleted. Data is like energy. It just changes form. I connected the device to my forensic workstation. I did not use the company network. I used an air-gapped system, completely isolated from the Obsidian grid. If I was going to perform an autopsy on my life, I would not leave a paper trail for HR to find. I initiated Deep Dive, a proprietary forensic tool I had helped code. The progress bar crawled across the screen. Extracting deleted caches, recovering fragmented chat logs, decrypting local backups. While the machine worked, I drank black coffee that tasted like burnt wire. I thought about the loans I had found the night before on the cloud. That had been the surface wound. I needed to see the internal bleeding. The screen flashed green. Extraction complete. I began to sift through the debris. The first layer was expected. Photos of him and various women. Mostly fleeting encounters at conferences. They were painful. Yes. But they were banal. They were the clichés of a weak man needing validation. But as I dug deeper into the timestamps from 6 months ago, the pattern changed. The random women disappeared. They were replaced by a single, constant presence. I opened the recovered chat log from a messaging app Silas thought was secure because it had an ephemeral timer. He didn't know that the tablet's cache retained thumbnails of disappearing media. I clicked on the profile picture of the contact saved as architect_client_04. The face that stared back at me was not a stranger. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was a sharp, physical blow, harder than the realization of the affair itself. It was Alara Vance. Alara was not just a woman. She was the vice president of strategic acquisitions at Vortex Corp. Vortex was Obsidian Dynamics' direct competitor. We had been locked in a corporate war for 5 years, fighting over government defense contracts and data security patents. Alara was my counterpart at Vortex. She was ruthless, brilliant, and she had smiled at me across the table at the industry gala 2 months ago, complimenting my earrings while secretly sleeping with my husband. But as I read the recovered messages, the nausea turned into cold dread. This was not a romance. It was a handler running an asset. Alara. 6 months ago. Did you get the access code for her home office router yet? The deadline is Friday. Silas. If you don't have it, I can't help you with the shark situation. Silas. I'm trying. She changes it weekly. I need more time. The sharks are threatening to call her. I paused the scroll. The sharks. I cross-referenced this term with the financial data I had pulled. I found a series of emails in the spam folder from a consulting group based in the Cayman Islands. They weren't consultants. They were predatory lenders, the kind that didn't report to credit bureaus but broke kneecaps. Silas hadn't just borrowed money. He had borrowed dirty money. He was in the hole for over $400,000. Alara Vance knew this. She had likely orchestrated it or discovered it, and she was using it. She was buying his debt and holding it over his head to turn him into a mole inside my house. I went back to the chat. Alara, 3 days ago. The USB drive. It's a simple plug and play. Just insert it into the server tower in the living room while she's in the shower. It will clone the network handshake. That's all I need to bypass Obsidian's VPN. Silas. I did it. It's plugged in behind the B&O sound system. When do I get the payout? Alara. When the data verifies, leave it there for 48 hours. I stared at the screen. The timestamps aligned perfectly. The 48-hour window expired tonight. Suddenly, the 155 missed calls made terrifying sense. Silas wasn't calling because he was heartbroken. He wasn't calling because he wanted to save our marriage. He was calling because he had left a piece of active corporate espionage hardware plugged into the back of my stereo system, and I had just locked him out of the house. He wasn't afraid of divorce court. He was afraid of federal prison. I grabbed my bag. I didn't bother shutting down the workstation. I ran out of the office, ignoring the confused greeting of the receptionist who was just clocking in. The drive back to Viridia Bay took me 20 minutes. I drove at 80 miles per hour, my mind racing faster than the engine. If that USB drive was found by Obsidian Security, I wouldn't just be a victim of a cheating husband. I would be flagged as a security risk. Negligence is as punishable as malice in my industry. I could lose my clearance. I could lose my career. I could be prosecuted for facilitating a breach. I burst into my house. The silence of the previous night still hung heavy in the air. The barricades were still down on the windows. I ran to the living room, the Bang & Olufsen sound system, a sleek monolith of Danish design that Silas had insisted we needed, stood in the corner. I reached behind the main unit, my fingers groping in the dust and wires. My fingertips brushed against something cool and plastic, a small, rectangular protrusion that didn't belong. I yanked it out. It was a matte black USB drive, no brand name, no markings. Just a lethal little piece of plastic that could destroy everything I had built for 15 years. I held it in my palm, my hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from rage. He had sold me out. He had sold my company out. And for what? To pay off gambling debts and impress a woman who viewed him as a useful idiot. I needed to know exactly what was on this drive before I destroyed it or handed it over. I couldn't trust the internal IT team at Obsidian. If I flagged this, it went on my permanent record. I needed a ghost. I pulled out my burner phone, a precaution I kept for high-risk audits, and dialed a number I hadn't used in 3 years. "Kaylin," I said when the line clicked open. "Hazel Ravenswood," a voice replied. It was deep, scratchy, sounding like gravel and cigarette smoke. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Did you finally get bored of the corporate ladder? I need a consultation, off the books, immediately. I'm at the Void. You have 20 minutes before I start drinking seriously." The Void was an internet cafe in the basement of a nondescript building in the warehouse district. It was where the city's gray hat hackers congregated. I met Kaylin Thorne in a private booth at the back. Kaylin was a man who looked like he had been assembled from spare parts of different noir detectives. He wore a faded leather jacket. His eyes were permanently bloodshot from staring at code, and he had the sharpest mind for encryption I had ever encountered. He was a private investigator who specialized in digital crimes, the kind the police didn't understand and the corporations wanted to hush up. I placed the matte black USB on the table between us. Kaylin looked at it. He hasn't touched it yet. "That's a nasty-looking suppository," he drawled. "It was plugged into my home server," I said. "My husband put it there." Kaylin raised an eyebrow. "The architect, I thought he only knew how to draw pretty lines." "He had help. Alara Vance." Kaylin whistled low and long. "Vortex Corp Hazel. You didn't just marry a loser. You married a Trojan horse." He pulled a laptop out of his bag. It was a heavy customized machine covered in stickers. He inserted the USB into a quarantined sandbox drive. I watched the code cascade down his screen. Kaylin's face lost its amusement. He leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "This isn't just a network bridge," Kaylin said, his voice dropping. "This is a polymorphic worm. It's designed to siphon keystrokes, passwords, and biometric hash keys. If this thing was active for 48 hours, it has everything. Your banking logins, your Obsidian root access, your social security number." He looked up at me. "Did you connect your work laptop to the home Wi-Fi this weekend?" "Yes," I whispered. "I worked from home on Saturday." "Then Alara has your credentials," Kaylin said. "She can log into Obsidian as you. She can steal trade secrets, transfer funds, or just plant evidence to frame you for embezzlement." I felt cold. "I have to report this to the board." "No," Kaylin said sharply. He slammed the laptop lid shut, but kept his hand on it. "Think, Hazel, if you go to Obsidian Security right now and say, 'My husband planted a bug that stole my admin keys,' what happens?" "They initiate a breach protocol," I said automatically. "And they fire you," Kaylin finished. Gross negligence. Allowing unauthorized access to a secure terminal. You signed the handbook. You know the rules. It doesn't matter that you're the victim. You are the vector. You'll be terminated, stripped of your equity, and probably sued for breach of contract. Vortex wins. Alara wins. I sat back against the booth's vinyl seat. He was right. The corporate world was binary. You were either secure or you were compromised. There was no box for betrayed by spouse. So what do? I asked. Kaylin picked up the USB drive and tossed it in the air, catching it with a snap of his hand. We scrub it, he said. We sanitize your home network. We change every credential you have, and we don't tell a soul at Obsidian until we have leverage. Leverage. You have the weapon now, Kaylin said, a dark grin spreading across his face. Alara thinks this drive is still transmitting. She thinks she's winning. We can feed it false data. We can make her think she's stealing gold when she's actually stealing lead. And Silas? Silas is the weak link, Kaylin said. He's terrified. He knows what he did. He's waiting for the FBI to kick down his door. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my personal email. I looked down. The subject line read, "Regarding the house. Urgent." It was from Silas. I opened it. Hazel, I have spoken to my lawyers. Your behavior last night was psychotic. Locking me out, calling the police, making false accusations, it proves that you are mentally unstable. I have been worried about your stress levels for months, and this confirms it. I am staying at a hotel. I expect you to vacate the house by tomorrow so I can collect my belongings in peace. If you don't, I will file for an emergency injunction based on your mental health history. Do not force me to have you committed. I'm trying to help you. Also, I know about the files you think you found. They are misunderstandings. If you try to use them, I will release the videos I have of you drinking alone every night. No judge will give custody of our assets to a functional alcoholic. Be reasonable. Silas, I read the email twice. The audacity was breathtaking. He was gaslighting me in writing. He was trying to pivot the narrative, painting me as the crazy drunk wife to cover his own crimes. He didn't know I had the USB. He didn't know I knew about Alara. He thought he was still playing a domestic drama, while I was now fighting a corporate war. Bad news, Kaylin asked, watching my face. He says I'm mentally unstable, I said, my voice steady. He wants the house. He doesn't want the house, Kaylin corrected. He wants the server. He needs to get back in to retrieve this drive before you find it. He's desperate. I looked at the email again. Do not force me to have you committed. A slow, cold anger burned in my stomach. It was cleaner than the grief. It was fuel. He wants a war, I said, looking at Kaylin. He thinks I'm a suffocating wife. Fine. I took the USB drive from Kaylin's hand and closed my fist around it. I'm not going to report him, I said. Not yet. I'm going to let him think he's safe. I'm going to let Alara think she's winning, and then I'm going to burn them both down using the very connection they tried to exploit. Kaylin signaled the waitress for a whiskey. Now that, he said, sounds like a job I can bill for. I'm hiring you, I said. I want full surveillance on Silas. I want to know every time he sneezes, and I want to know everything about Alara Vance's vulnerabilities. Alara is a shark, Kaylin warned. If you miss, she eats you. I don't intend to miss, I said. I stood up. I have to go back to the office. I have to act like everything is normal. I have to be the dutiful, stressed wife who is falling apart. The autopsy is done, Kaylin said, raising his glass. Time for the funeral. No, I said, walking toward the exit. Time for the resurrection. The war did not start with a scream. It started with a whisper campaign that was far more damaging than any shouting match could have been. For the next 3 days, my life became a masterclass in public humiliation, orchestrated by a man who knew exactly where my insecurities were buried. Silas knew that for all my corporate armor, I cared deeply about my reputation. I had spent 15 years building a brand of unshakable competence, of cold logic and reliability. He decided to dismantle it brick by brick. It began on social media. I did not have personal accounts, but my friends did, and Silas, the charming architect, had charmed them all over the years. I started receiving screenshots from well-meaning acquaintances. Silas had posted a black and white photo of himself looking out a window, a glass of scotch in hand, with a caption that was a work of art in passive-aggressive victimhood. Sometimes, the people we love the most are the ones hurting the deepest. Mental health is a silent battle, praying for my wife as she navigates this dark chapter. I am sleeping on a friend's couch tonight, but my heart is still at home. Please give Hazel space. She is not herself right now. It was brilliant. It was evil. In one paragraph, he had framed my discovery of his affair and his attempted break-in as a psychotic break on my part. He wasn't the cheater. He was the martyr. He wasn't the abuser. He was the displaced saint. The isolation was immediate. The brunch invitations dried up. The group chats went silent. People I had known for a decade were suddenly looking at me with pity, or worse, fear. They didn't see a woman standing up for herself. They saw a ticking time bomb. Then came the call from my parents. My parents lived in the Midwest, in a town where divorce was still whispered about behind hands at church. They adored Silas. He called them on their birthdays. He sent my father rare cigars. He was the son they never had. Hazel, my mother's voice was trembling when I answered the phone on Tuesday night. Silas called us. He was weeping. Hazel, he said you threw him out on the street without a coat. He said you were screaming at people who weren't there. He's lying. Mom, I said, gripping the phone tight. He cheated on me. He tried to break down the door. He told us you would say that, my father chimed in on the other line. His voice was stern, the voice of a disappointed patriarch. He said, you've been paranoid for months, seeing things, suspecting everyone. Hazel, honey, marriage is hard. You don't just throw a man like Silas away because of a misunderstanding. You are working too hard. It's affecting your mind. It's not a misunderstanding, I snapped, my composure slipping. I have proof. See, my mother said softly. You sound hysterical. Dear, please, for us. Just meet with him. Let him come home. He loves you so much, he's willing to overlook this episode. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't. The gaslighting had crossed state lines. He had weaponized my own family against me. I sat in the empty living room, the silence ringing in my ears. Was I being too hard? Was I imagining the severity of it? No. I touched the cold plastic of the USB drive in my pocket. The data did not lie. But the doubt was a seed, and Silas was watering it. The next morning at Obsidian Dynamics, the assault escalated. I walked into the lobby at 8 a.m, ready to bury myself in spreadsheets. The receptionist, a young girl named Sarah, who usually greeted me with a bright smile, looked down at her desk as I approached. She looked uncomfortable. Good morning, Sarah, I said. Good morning, Mrs. Sterling, she mumbled. She pointed to the reception counter. These came for you. They are really heavy. It was a floral arrangement. It was not just a bouquet. It was a monument. 3 dozen white lilies. Standing 4 feet tall in a crystal vase, it was the kind of thing you sent to a funeral, or a very public apology. There was a card, purely white, stuck into the center. It was not in an envelope. It was open for anyone to read. I pulled it out. Silas's handwriting was looped and artistic. I forgive you. Hazel. No matter what you said, or what you did, I am still here. I am ready to help you get better. Come back to me. I felt the eyes of the entire lobby on me, the security guards, the other executives waiting for the elevator, the couriers. They had all read it. They all thought I had done something terrible. They thought I was the one who needed forgiveness. My face burned. I wanted to smash the vase on the floor, but that would only prove his point. See, she's violent. She's unstable. Trash it, I told Sarah, my voice like ice. But they are beautiful, she stammered. I said, put it in the garbage compactor, now. I walked to the elevators, my back straight, while the whispers followed me like a cloud of gnats. At lunch, I went to the cafeteria to buy a bottle of water and a salad. I swiped my Platinum credit card. Declined. I frowned and swiped it again. Declined. Please contact the issuer. The cashier, a woman I saw every day, gave me a sympathetic look. Maybe the chip is dirty. I pulled out my backup card. A different bank. Declined. Card reported lost/stolen. I left the food on the counter and walked away, my stomach twisting into a knot. I checked my banking app. Locked. Access denied. Silas had called the banks. As a joint account holder, he had flagged suspicious activity. He had reported my personal cards as stolen, claiming he was me or that I had lost my purse. It would take 48 hours to untangle the identity verification. In the meantime, I was penniless. He was cutting off my supply lines. He was grounding me. I drove home that evening, feeling the walls of the city closing in. I was a director of risk analysis, and I was being outmaneuvered by an architect with a gambling problem. I decided to stop at a high-end grocery store to buy wine using the emergency cash I kept in my glove box. I needed something to dull the edge of the anger. I was reaching for a bottle of Pinot Noir when a hand touched my arm. Hazel. Oh my God, is that you? I turned, standing there, looking effortlessly chic in a trench coat and heels, was Alara Vance. She looked surprised, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. She scanned my face, looking for cracks. Alara, I said. I forced a smile. It felt like stretching rubber. Small world? I haven't seen you at the industry roundtables lately, she said. Her voice dripping with synthetic honey. She tilted her head. You look tired. Hazel, are you okay? I heard some rumors about Silas staying at a hotel. She knew. Of course she knew. She was likely paying for the hotel. We are just renovating, I lied. Dust allergies. Alara placed a hand on my shoulder. Her grip was firm, condescending. You know, we push ourselves so hard in this industry, burnout is real. If you need a break, you should take it. Nobody would blame you if you stepped down for a while to focus on your health. Silas is so worried about you. There it was. The pivot. She wasn't just the mistress. She was the corporate rival. She was planting the suggestion that I was unfit to lead. She wanted me out of Obsidian Dynamics as much as she wanted me out of the marriage. My health is fine, Alara, I said, stepping back to break her contact. But thank you for your concern. I hope Vortex is doing well. I heard you lost the government bid last week. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. Take care of yourself. Hazel, really? She walked away. I watched her go. I realized then that I wasn't fighting two separate enemies. I was fighting a two-headed monster. When I got home, the house felt different. It was subtle. If I hadn't been in a state of hypervigilance, I might have missed it. The rug in the hallway was shifted 2 inches to the left. A book on the coffee table, The Architecture of Happiness, ironically was face down. I always left my books face up. I stood in the center of the living room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had changed the digital locks. The smart system said no one had entered. The logs were clean, but Silas was an architect. He had designed the renovation of this house 3 years ago. I remembered suddenly, with a jolt of nausea, that he had insisted on keeping the original mechanical lock on the back service door, the one behind the garage. For emergencies, in case the power grid failed, I had forgotten about it. I never used that door. He had a key, a physical, non-digital key. He had been here, while I was at work being humiliated. He had been inside. Silas, I called out, my voice echoing in the empty house. Silence. I wasn't alone, even if he wasn't physically here. His presence was smeared over everything. I felt watched. I felt the skin on the back of my neck prickle. I pulled out my burner phone and texted Kaylin. Code red. My house is compromised. I think he was here. Kaylin arrived 20 minutes later. He didn't park in the driveway. He parked 2 streets over and walked through the neighbors' yards. Dressed in black, he carried a heavy duffel bag. Stay in the kitchen, he ordered. "Don't say anything important." He pulled out a device that looked like a Geiger counter. It was a radio frequency spectrum analyzer. He began to sweep the room. He moved slowly, waving the wand over the bookshelves, the smoke detectors, and the lamps. Nothing in the living room, nothing in the kitchen. He moved upstairs to the master bedroom. I followed him, holding my breath. He swept the wand over the bed. The device remained silent. He swept it over the closet. Silent. Then, he pointed it at the air conditioning vent directly opposite the bed. The device began to chirp, a high-pitched, frantic rhythm. Kaylin climbed onto a chair. He unscrewed the vent cover. He reached inside and pulled out a tiny object, no larger than a button. It had a lens the size of a pinhead. He showed it to me. He didn't speak. He just pointed to the flashing red LED on the back. It was transmitting, live. I covered my mouth. He climbed down and took a pen and paper from my desk. He wrote, "It's a wide-angle 4K lens, audio and video, transmitting to a private IP, likely Silas watching from his hotel." He motioned for the pen. I handed it back. Why I wrote, "To watch me sleep." Kaylin shook his head. He wrote, "To see if you found the USB, to see if you are panicking. He needs to know if the coast is clear to come back and retrieve the malware." I stared at the camera in Kaylin's hand. Silas was watching me right now. He was waiting for me to break. He was waiting for me to call the police so he could claim I was hallucinating. Or he was waiting for me to pass out so he could sneak in and steal the evidence. If I destroyed the camera, he would know I knew. The game would change. He would panic and maybe run. I looked at Kaylin. An idea formed in my mind. It was reckless, but it was the only way to buy time. I took the pen, put it back. Kaylin looked at me like I was insane. He wrote, "What put it back?" I wrote, underlining it twice, "I'm going to give him a show." Kaylin hesitated. Then a slow grin appeared on his face. He understood. He climbed back up and reinstalled the camera. He packed up his gear and left through the back door, staying out of the camera's sightline. I was alone again, but now I had an audience. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of wine. I opened it. I poured a glass. Then another. I splashed some on my blouse. I messed up my hair, pulling strands loose until I looked disheveled. I walked into the bedroom, right into the frame of the hidden camera. I slumped onto the floor at the foot of the bed. I drank from the bottle, letting it spill down my chin. I began to sob. It wasn't entirely acting. The stress was real. The fear was real. But I amplified it. I wailed. I screamed Silas's name. I grabbed a pillow and tore at it with my teeth. I curled into a ball, rocking back and forth, muttering, "I'm sorry. Silas, I'm sorry. Please come home. I don't know what's happening." I did this for an hour. It was exhausting. It was degrading. But it was necessary. Somewhere, in a hotel room, Silas was watching this feed. He was seeing exactly what he wanted to see. A broken woman, a wife who was dissolving into alcohol and madness. He would feel safe. He would think the USB was still undiscovered, just sitting there behind the stereo while his crazy wife cried herself to sleep. He would think he had won. Finally, I pretended to pass out on the rug. I lay still, breathing heavily, after 20 minutes of playing dead. I crawled into the bathroom, the only room I hoped didn't have a camera, and locked the door. I washed the wine off my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, but they were clear. I sat on the edge of the tub and called Trixie. "He froze my accounts," I whispered, "and he bugged the bedroom." "That son of a bitch," Trixie hissed. "I have the emergency injunction ready. I can have a judge sign it in an hour. We can have him arrested for stalking." "No," I said. "Not yet." "Hazel, are you crazy? He is violating every privacy law in the state." "He thinks I'm crazy," I said. "He thinks I'm broken. He saw me drunk on the floor. He's going to get careless." "Trixie, he's going to think he has time." "What are you waiting for?" Trixie asked. "I need him to feel secure," I said. I need him to think he's winning so he doesn't run. I need him to lead me to the money he stole. And I need Alara to think she's safe so she keeps talking to him. You are playing a dangerous game, Trixie warned. I know, I said, but I'm not playing defense anymore. I'm setting a trap. Fine, Trixie sighed, but I'm filing the paperwork the second you give the signal. Don't die, Hazel. I won't, I said. I hung up. I unlocked the bathroom door and stumbled back into the bedroom, resuming my role as the tragic, fallen wife. I climbed into bed, fully clothed, and pulled the duvet over my head. Under the darkness of the covers, I opened my eyes. I didn't sleep. I lay there, listening to the house, waiting for the next move. Silas thought he was the director of this play. He didn't realize he was just an actor, and I had just rewritten the third act. The meeting took place at the Obsidian Grind, a coffee shop halfway between my office and the hotel, where Silas was currently playing the role of the exiled bachelor. I chose the location. It was public, crowded, and loud, the perfect environment for a hostage negotiation disguised as a marital reconciliation. I arrived 15 minutes late. This was calculated. I wanted him to stew. I wanted him to check his watch and wonder if I was coming, to let his anxiety build just enough to make him grateful when I finally appeared. I had dressed for the part of the defeated wife. I wore no makeup, letting the dark circles under my eyes, which were actually carefully applied eyeshadow, tell a story of sleepless nights. My hair was pulled back in a messy, loose bun, and I wore a cardigan that was 2 sizes too big, swallowing my frame to make me look small, fragile, and harmless. When I walked in, Silas was sitting at a corner table. He looked infuriatingly well-rested. He was wearing a crisp white linen shirt, the top buttons undone to show off his tan. He had a latte in front of him and was scrolling through his phone with the casual arrogance of a man who believes he has already won the lottery but is just waiting for the check to clear. He saw me and stood up. He didn't smile. He put on a mask of grave, pained concern. "Hazel," he said, reaching out to touch my arm. I flinched, pulling away slightly. It was a nice touch. I thought, "You look exhausted." "I haven't slept, Silas," I said, my voice raspy. "I don't know what is real anymore." "Sit down," he urged, pulling out my chair. "I ordered you a chamomile tea. It will help with the nerves." I sat. The tea was lukewarm. I wrapped my hands around the cup, hunching my shoulders. "Why did you want to meet? You said in the email you wanted the house." "I don't want the house." "Hazel," Silas said softly. He leaned in, his eyes locking onto mine with that intense, practiced sincerity that had fooled me for 7 years. "I want to save us, but I can't do that if you are hoarding everything. You are not thinking clearly. The paranoia, the drinking, is destroying our assets." He reached into his leather messenger bag and pulled out a thick document. He slid it across the table. "What is this?" I asked, staring at the legal jargon on the cover page. "It is a temporary asset management agreement," Silas explained, his voice smooth like velvet. "It transfers the power of attorney for our liquid assets and the deed to the Viridia Bay property into a holding trust. I will manage it. Just until you get better, just until you are stable again, it ensures that you don't do something rash, like sell the house in a fit of hysteria." I looked at the papers. It was a robbery in broad daylight. If I signed this, he could liquidate everything, pay off his gambling debts, funnel the rest to Alara, and leave me with nothing but chamomile tea. "I don't know," I stammered, looking down at my hands. "It feels like I'm giving up control." "You are giving up the burden. Hazel," he corrected. "Let me carry the weight. I am your husband." I looked up at him, letting my lip tremble. "If I sign this, will you come home?" "Of course," he said instantly. "We can start over. A clean slate." "But what about her?" I whispered. Silas stiffened. "Who?" "You know who?" I said, a spark of jealousy entering my voice. "The woman at the resort. The one you were texting. I can't sign this if she is still in your life." Silas sighed, a sound of long-suffering patience. "Hazel, I told you. That was a fling. It meant nothing. It is over. Prove it, I demanded. It was the first time I had shown backbone in the conversation, and he looked surprised. How? Call her, I said. Right now, put it on speaker. Tell her it is over. Tell her you chose your wife. Silas hesitated. I watched his eyes dart to the left. He was calculating. He had likely anticipated this. He and Alara had probably rehearsed it. Fine, he said. If that is what it takes to earn your trust. He placed his phone on the table between us. It was an expensive model, sleek and black. He dialed a number. Speaker, I reminded him. He tapped the speaker icon. The phone rang twice. Then, a female voice answered. Hello? Alara, Silas said, his voice dropping to a harsh, cold register. It is Silas. Silas. Why are you calling? I thought. Listen to me, he interrupted. I am sitting here with my wife. I am realizing that I made a terrible mistake. You meant nothing to me. Alara, you were a distraction. I love Hazel, and I am going to fix my marriage. Do not contact me again. Do not come near us. Is that clear? There was silence on the other end. Then, the sound of a stifled sob. You bastard. After everything. Goodbye, Alara, Silas said. And he hung up. He looked at me, his face the picture of righteous redemption. There, it is done. Are you happy? It was a magnificent performance. If I hadn't already read their chat logs where he called me a cash cow, I might have believed it. I think so, I said, exhaling shakily. I just need a minute. I feel a bit dizzy. Take your time, Silas said, pushing the papers closer. But the notary closes in an hour. I need to use the restroom, I said, standing up unsteadily. I will be right back. Go ahead, he said. He picked up his coffee cup. His phone was still on the table. This was a gamble. A man like Silas, arrogant and believing he had completely, totally subdued his victim, would not feel the need to guard his device against a woman he thought was broken. He wanted to show me he had nothing to hide, now that he had made the call. I walked toward the back of the cafe. I didn't go to the bathroom. I waited behind a decorative pillar, watching him. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking out the window, smiling at his reflection. I turned back and walked to the table. Silas, I forgot my purse. He jumped slightly. Oh, right. I grabbed my bag, and in the same motion, I let my hand brush against his phone. I had a small, flat device palmed in my hand, a near-field communication cloner Kaylin had given me. It didn't need to be plugged in. It just needed to touch the target device for 3 seconds to exploit a vulnerability in the Bluetooth stack. I am so clumsy, I muttered, fumbling with my bag strap, keeping my hand pressed over his phone. 1, 2, 3, I felt a tiny vibration in my palm. Payload delivered. Got it, I said. Be right back. I walked to the bathroom. I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The software Kaylin had built was now burying itself in the root directory of Silas's operating system. It would turn his microphone into a remote listening device. I splashed water on my face, not to fake tears this time, but to cool the heat of adrenaline. When I returned to the table, I sat down and looked at the papers. I can't sign them today. Silas, I said. His face fell. What? You just saw me. I know, I said, and I appreciate it, but my hand is shaking too much. I need to go home. I need to sleep. Come by tomorrow morning. I will have them signed. Silas looked like he wanted to scream. I saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. But he couldn't break character now. He was too close. Okay, he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, get some rest. Hazel. I left him there. I walked out of the cafe, got into my car, and drove 2 blocks away. I pulled over and opened Kaylin's app on my phone. Target status active, audio feed live. I put on my headphones. I heard the ambient noise of the coffee shop. Then, the sound of a number being dialed. She is gone, Silas's voice came through, crystal clear. Did she sign? Alara's voice replied. She wasn't crying. She sounded bored. No, she stalled. She wants to do it tomorrow, but she bought the breakup act. Hook, line, and sinker. God. She looked pathetic, wearing this ugly oversized sweater, shaking like a leaf. Make sure she signs. Silas, Alara warned. We need that house deed. The equity in that property is the only way you are going to pay off the sharks. I know, Silas said. Don't worry. Once I get the power of attorney, I'm going to have her declared incompetent. I'll put her in that private mental ward upstate, the one with the high walls. She won't be able to talk to anyone. I sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel. Mental ward. He wasn't just planning to rob me. He was planning to erase me. Just get it done, Alara said. I am tired of waiting. And Silas, don't forget to delete this call log. I'm not an idiot. Alara. The line went dead. I took off my headphones. The sadness I had been carrying, the heavy, wet blanket of grief, finally evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, sharp blade of resolve. I started the car. I didn't go home. I drove to the specialized storage facility where Silas kept his investments. Silas loved watches. He had a collection of vintage timepieces that he claimed were appreciating assets, but because his credit was ruined years ago, he had put the insurance policy and the ownership titles in my name. Legally, they were mine. I walked into the vault. I opened the safe. There they were. A Patek Philippe Nautilus, a Rolex Daytona, an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. I took them all. Then I drove to the luxury car garage where his weekend car, a vintage Porsche 911, was stored, again, titled in my name for insurance purposes. I drove the Porsche to a high-end dealership that specialized in instant cash buyouts for exotic vehicles. I want to sell it, I told the dealer. And the watches. The dealer looked at the merchandise. This is a significant collection, ma'am. Are you sure? I am decluttering, I said flatly. I want a wire transfer. Today, 2 hours later, I walked out with a certified check for $350,000. It wasn't the full market value, but it was liquid ammunition. I deposited the money into a new, secure account at a bank Silas didn't know existed. Then, I went to Obsidian Dynamics. It was late. The offices were mostly dark. I logged into the central mainframe. I pulled up the project files for Project Aegis, the massive government security contract I was leading. It was the project Alara wanted. It was the reason she had targeted Silas. She wanted the schematics. I initiated a protocol change. I switched the access encryption from a standard password system to a biometric lock requiring a retinal scan and a voice print. Specifically, mine. Even if Alara had my old passwords, even if she had the stolen admin keys from the USB drive, she couldn't get in. Not without my eyes. Then, I made my move. I opened a secure chat channel with Silas. I knew he would be watching his phone, waiting for me to sleep. I typed Silas. I can't sleep. I was looking through the old filing cabinet for the deed, and I found something strange. A black binder labeled Shadow Accounts. It looks like a second set of books for your architecture firm. Why are there transfers to the Cayman Islands? I hit send. I didn't have any such binder. It was a complete lie. But I knew guilty men always believed their secrets had been found. I switched back to the audio feed from his phone. 1 minute later, pick up, pick up, pick up. Silas was screaming at his phone. What? Alara answered. She found it. She found the black report. What report? You told me you burned the physical copies of the embezzlement logs. Alara shrieked. I did. I don't know what she has. Maybe I missed one, Alara. If she gives that to the IRS, I am going to jail for 20 years. You have to stop her. Calm down, Alara commanded. She is bluffing, or she is too stupid to understand what she is looking at. She is a risk analyst. It is her job to understand fraud. She is going to destroy us. Okay, listen to me, Alara said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. We have to accelerate the timeline. We can't wait for her to sign the papers. We need to discredit her completely. Tonight. How? I am going to plant the evidence on her work computer now, Alara said. The tax evasion strings. I will make it look like she was the one funneling money to the Caymans. I will tip off the FBI anonymous line in the morning. By the time she wakes up, she won't be filing reports. She will be in handcuffs. Do it, Silas breathed. Do it now, I smiled. The trap had sprung. I called Kaylin. She is making her move, I said. She is trying to remotely access my Obsidian terminal to plant fake evidence. I see her, Kaylin said. I could hear the clacking of his mechanical keyboard in the background. She is using a VPN routed through Russia, but her digital fingerprint is all over it. She is trying to inject a packet of falsified bank transfers into your user directory. Can you stop her? Stop her, Kaylin laughed darkly. Hazel, I am not going to stop her. I am going to let her walk right in. What? We need proof of intent, Kaylin explained. If I block her, she just tries again later. I'm going to let her upload the files, but I'm redirecting her connection. She thinks she is writing to your hard drive. Actually, she is writing to a honeypot server I set up an hour ago. I am recording every keystroke. I am recording her IP. I am recording her screen. So when she hits execute, she is signing her own confession. Kaylin finished. She is digitally fingerprinting a federal crime, attempted framing, evidence tampering, corporate espionage. I leaned back in my chair. The office was dark, but the city lights outside were bright. Let her finish, I said. And send me the log. With pleasure. I hung up. I looked at the phone. A message popped up from Silas. Hazel, honey, don't worry about those papers. Just go to sleep. We will talk in the morning. I love you. I typed back. Okay. Good night. I put the phone down. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to watch the numbers on Kaylin's screen turn my enemies into dust. The Trojan horse hadn't just entered the city. It had opened the gates, and the army was already inside. The glow of the monitors in Kaylin's workspace was the only light in the room. It was 3 a.m, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins made sleep a distant, irrelevant concept. We were not just watching a crime happen anymore. We were dissecting it. Alara's attack had been surgical, but arrogant. She had assumed I was a technophobe, a frantic wife too busy crying over a cheating husband to monitor packet traffic. That arrogance was her undoing. Kaylin sat back in his chair, cracking his knuckles. The screen displayed a complex web of routing numbers and IP addresses, all converging on a single, encrypted terminal in the penthouse of the Vortex Corp building. We have her, Kaylin said, his voice rough with fatigue but sharp with satisfaction. She didn't just knock on the door, she left her fingerprints on the handle. We have the logs of the attempted file injection. Frame up. Plain and simple. Is it enough to bury her? I asked, leaning over his shoulder. It is enough to get her fired, Kaylin replied. Maybe indicted if the prosecutor is bored, but you don't want her fired. Hazel, you want her controlled. He was right. A fired enemy is a loose cannon. A compromised enemy is a puppet. We need more, I said. We need to cut the head off the snake. Let's look at Silas. I thought we cleaned him out. We cleaned out his personal devices, I corrected. But Silas is an architect. He lives in his firm's server. If he is embezzling money to pay the sharks, he isn't pulling it out of thin air. He is pulling it from the company accounts. Kaylin grinned. It was a wolfish expression. Now you are talking dirty. Give me 10 minutes. It took him 8. The cybersecurity at Sterling and Associates was embarrassing. It relied on a firewall that hadn't been patched in 6 months. Kaylin slipped through the back door of their accounting software like a ghost. We spent the next hour combing through the ledger. It was a masterclass in creative accounting. Silas had been creating invoices for phantom vendors companies with names like Structural Solutions, LLC, and Apex Materials, and approving the payments himself. Look at this, Kaylin pointed at a recurring transfer. $12,000 a month to Vance Consulting. That is not a vendor. That is Alara, I whispered. He is paying her. He is paying her off, Kaylin corrected. Or he is splitting the spoils. Either way, she is receiving stolen funds. That makes her an accessory to embezzlement. That is a felony. That is prison time. But then, we found something else. Something that made the narrative shift from a simple crime to a complex tragedy. In the firm's internal messaging system, which Silas used because he thought it was internal and therefore safe, there was a thread archived under the name Project Legacy. I expected to see blueprints. Instead, I saw a conversation. Silas. Dinner was perfect. Your father suspects nothing. Recipient. He thinks you are just a diligent employee. He doesn't know you are the future of this firm. Silas. Once the merger happens and the old man retires, we will run this city. Just be patient. Darling, I looked at the recipient's name, Maya_K. Who is Maya K? Kaylin asked. Maya King, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. She is the daughter of Robert King, Silas's boss, the owner of the firm. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He isn't just cheating on me with Alara. He is cheating on Alara with Maya. Alara is the cash cow he is milking to pay his debts. But Maya is the golden ticket. He wants to marry into the firm. The man is ambitious, Kaylin noted. Stupid, but ambitious. This is it, I said. This is the leverage. Alara thinks she won the prize. She thinks she stole the husband. She doesn't know she is just a stepping stone. So, what is the play? Kaylin asked, spinning his chair around to face me. Do we leak it to the boss? No, I said. Standing up, I felt a surge of energy, a cold, predatory focus that wiped away the exhaustion. I am going to have a girls' night out. I arranged the meeting with Alara for the following evening. I sent the invitation through a courier. A handwritten note on heavy cardstock, I surrender. Let's discuss the terms of the divorce settlement. The Onyx Lounge. 7 o'clock. The Onyx Lounge was dark, expensive, and discreet. It was the kind of place where business deals were made in hushed tones over $20 cocktails. Alara arrived 10 minutes late, looking victorious. She wore a red dress that was designed to intimidate, her hair sleek, her makeup flawless. She slid into the booth opposite me with the grace of a jungle cat. I am surprised, Hazel, she said, signaling the waiter. I thought you would drag this out for months. Silas said you were stubborn. I am pragmatic, I said, sipping my sparkling water. You won. He is yours. I just want to minimize the damage to my portfolio. Alara smiled. It was a cruel, satisfying expression. Smart choice. Silas is a complicated man, but he needs a woman who understands his ambition. No offense, but you always seemed a bit domestic for him. He certainly has ambition, I agreed. Is that why you are helping him embezzle money from his firm? Alara froze. Her hand stopped halfway to her glass. Excuse me. I slid a folder across the table. It was thin. It contained only 2 sheets of paper. One was the bank transfer record showing the payments to Vance Consulting. The other was a summary of the penal code for grand larceny and conspiracy. I know about $12,000 a month, I said softly. I know about the fake invoices, and I know that if I hand this to the district attorney, you aren't just losing your job at Vortex. You are going to a federal facility where they don't serve martinis. Alara's face went pale, then red. You can't prove I knew where the money came from. He told me it was consulting fees for advice on his independent projects. Ignorance is not a defense when you are receiving laundered money. Alara, especially when you are a corporate executive, the jury won't buy it. She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. She was cornered, but she wasn't defeated yet. If I go down, Silas goes down. You really want to send the father of your well. You don't have children, do you? You want to send your husband to prison? I don't care about Silas, I said. He is dead to me, but I am willing to offer you a lifeboat. Why? Because you have something I want. You have the data Silas stole from my server. The Project Aegis files. Alara laughed nervously. I don't know what you are talking about. Stop it, I snapped. The command was sharp enough to make her flinch. I am done playing. You have the drive, or you have a copy. I want it back, and I want you to confirm, in writing, that Silas acted alone in the theft. And if I do, then this folder disappears. I won't report you for the embezzlement. You walk away. You keep your job. You keep your freedom. Alara looked at the folder, then at me. She was calculating the odds. She was a survivor. She didn't love Silas. She loved the game, and she knew when she was beaten. But Silas, she started. He promised me. What did he promise you? I interrupted. That you two would be a power couple. That he would leave me and build an empire with you. I reached into my bag and pulled out the second item. It was a tablet. I placed it on the table and pressed play. The audio was crisp. It was a recording of Silas and Maya King, taken from the bugs Kalen had planted in his office earlier that day. Silas. She is just a fling, Maya. Alara is useful for the Vortex deal, but she is intense. She suffocates me. You are the only one who really gets the vision, Maya. My dad hates her. He thinks she is a shark. Silas. She is a shark, and once I get what I need from her, I will cut her loose, just like I'm cutting Hazel loose. It's you and me, babe, the Sterling King legacy. I stopped the recording. Alara stared at the tablet. Her mouth was slightly open. The color had drained completely from her face. The betrayal in her eyes wasn't heartbreak. It was the shock of a predator realizing she had been out-hunted. He is playing you, Alara, I said gently. He is using you to destroy me, and he is using you to steal from his firm. But his endgame isn't you. It is the boss's daughter. You are just another rung on his ladder. Alara closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. When she opened them, the arrogance was gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard fury. That son of a bitch, she whispered. He is, I agreed. So, do we have a deal? Alara reached into her clutch. She pulled out a small silver flash drive. She slid it across the table to me. This is the master copy, she said. I haven't uploaded it to the Vortex servers yet. I was waiting for him to finalize the divorce, so I had leverage. I took the drive. I didn't trust her fully, but it felt heavy enough to be real. And the statement, I asked. Draft it, she said. I will sign it. I will say he manipulated me. I will say, I didn't know the source of the funds. Good. One condition, Alara said. Her eyes were glittering with malice now. I want to be there when you destroy him. You will be, I promised. But for now, you need to play the part. He needs to think you are still on his side. He needs to think he is safe. Can you do that? Hazel, she said, picking up her drink and draining it in one swallow. For the chance to watch Silas Sterling burn, I will win an Oscar. I left the lounge feeling lighter than I had in years. I had just turned the enemy's general into my lieutenant. The next few days were a blur of activity, with the immediate threat of the data breach neutralized. I could focus on the final act. Silas, oblivious to the fact that his two women had just formed a coalition against him, began to panic. He sensed Alara pulling away. She stopped answering his texts immediately. She canceled their lunch dates. He blamed me, of course. He sent me angry emails, accusing me of poisoning his social circle. You are turning everyone against me, he wrote. You are vindictive. I didn't reply. I was too busy reinventing myself. For 7 years, I had been Hazel the dutiful wife, Hazel the sensible risk analyst. Hazel wore beige and navy blue and kept her hair in a practical ponytail. That woman was dead. Silas had killed her the moment he texted me to stop suffocating him. I went to a stylist in the city, a man known for his brutal honesty. Cut it, I said. Sharp, dangerous. He gave me an angular bob that framed my face like a helmet of war. I dyed it a shade darker, a deep, obsidian black, I went shopping. I threw out the cardigans and the sensible slacks. I bought tailored suits with plunging necklines, stilettos that clicked like gunshots on the pavement, and silk blouses in blood red and emerald green. When I walked into Obsidian Dynamics on Monday morning, the security guard didn't recognize me for a full 3 seconds. My team stared. I didn't look like a victim of a messy divorce. I looked like the CEO of a company that crushed competitors for sport. I met Kalen for lunch. He looked at my new hair and whistled. Femme fatale, he noted. A bit cliché, but effective. It is armor, I said, and it is a signal. To whom? To Silas, I said. He likes shiny things. He likes power. When he sees me like this, he won't see the wife he discarded. He will see a challenge, and he won't be able to resist trying to conquer me one last time. We have the accounting records, Kalen said, sliding a hard drive across the table. We have the audio of him admitting to the affair with Maya. We have Alara's testimony ready to go. When do we pull the trigger? Not yet, I said. Saturday. What is Saturday? The Phoenix Rising Charity Gala. I said. I am hosting it. Silas will be there. He thinks he is going to walk in with Maya and humiliate me in front of the city's elite. I smiled, and Kalen actually shivered slightly. He has no idea, I whispered. I am not just hosting a party. I am hosting his execution. The invitations for the Phoenix Rising Gala weighed exactly 4 ounces each. They were printed on matte black cardstock with gold leaf lettering that caught the light like embers. I had spent $2,000 on the design alone, ensuring that they looked less like tickets to a charity dinner and more like summons to a royal court. The event was ostensibly to raise money for urban renewal in Viridia Bay, a cause perfectly aligned with Obsidian Dynamics' corporate social responsibility profile. In reality, it was a stage. I had built the set, arranged the lighting, and cast the actors. Now, I just needed the villain to walk into the spotlight. I sat at my desk, holding the envelope addressed to Mr. Silas Sterling. Most wives in the middle of a high-stakes divorce would hide from their husbands. They would communicate through lawyers and avoid eye contact. I was doing the opposite. I was inviting him into the lion's den. I picked up a fountain pen and flipped the card over. On the RSVP line, I had pre-filled a specific instruction. Admit Mr. Sterling and guest. I did not write spouse. I did not write Alara. I left it wide open. It was a test, and it was a trap. Silas, with his monumental ego, would interpret this in one of 2 ways. Either he would think I was capitulating, trying to show him I could be the cool modern ex-wife to win him back, or he would see it as an opportunity to twist the knife. He would think that bringing a date to my own company's gala would be the ultimate power move. A public declaration that he had moved on and upgraded. I dropped the envelope in the outgoing mail tray. Let's see who you bring to the slaughter. Silas, I whispered. 2 days later, the answer arrived via the gossip mill of Viridia Bay, which was faster than fiber optic internet. I was having lunch with a junior associate when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a frenemy who sat on the board of the country club. Saw Silas at the club lunch. He is RSVPing to your gala. He is bringing Maya King. Bold move. Hazel. Are you okay? I didn't smile, though I felt a surge of dark satisfaction. Maya King, the boss's daughter, the 23-year-old heiress he was currently grooming to be his next financial lifeline. He wasn't bringing Alara. He was discarding Alara. He calculated that appearing with Maya would solidify his standing at the architecture firm and humiliate me simultaneously. He was walking right into the crosshairs. I opened my encrypted chat with Alara. Since our meeting at the Onyx Lounge, she had been quiet, playing her part as the spurned lover. Me. He is taking Maya to the gala. He just bought her a dress from the Valentino Fall collection. I saw the typing bubbles appear instantly, then disappear, then appear again. Alara. He told me he was going alone to network. He told me I couldn't come because it would look bad for the divorce proceedings. Me. He lied. He is parading her. He thinks he has secured the king fortune. so he doesn't need us anymore. Elara. I am going to kill him, me. Don't. Not yet. Get mad. Elara. But save it for the party. I have a front row seat for you. I put the phone away. The fuse was lit. Elara Vance was a woman who could handle being the other woman, but she could not handle being the forgotten woman. Silas had just made an enemy of the one person who knew where all his skeletons were buried. But the trap wasn't finished. I needed one more piece of evidence. I needed Silas to commit a felony that didn't involve a computer. I needed him to get his hands dirty. That evening, I did not go home. I stayed at Kaylin's safe house, a loft apartment in the industrial district filled with monitors and empty coffee cups. Are the sensors active? I asked, pacing behind Kaylin's chair. Motion, thermal, and audio, Kaylin confirmed. The house is a live studio. If a mouse farts in the pantry, we will hear it. I had spent the last 48 hours carefully planting the bait. I had accidentally let slip in an email to my mother, knowing Silas monitored her account, that I had brought the black report home to verify some numbers before turning it over to the IRS. I mentioned I had locked it in the wall safe in the master bedroom, the one Silas had installed himself. I knew he couldn't resist. He was desperate. The walls were closing in. The sharks were demanding payment, and he believed this report was the only thing standing between him and prison. Target approaching, Kaylin said. Tapping the screen, I leaned in. On the monitor, grainy night vision footage showed the familiar silhouette of the smart car parking a block away from my house. It was 2 a.m. Silas emerged. He was dressed in black, a caricature of a cat burglar. He moved through the neighbor's hedge, avoiding the main gate. He is going for the side entrance, I noted. The one with the mechanical lock. He thinks he is clever, Kaylin muttered. We watched as Silas picked the lock. It took him 3 minutes. He was clumsy, his hands shaking. He was not a criminal mastermind. He was a panicked animal. He slipped inside. Interior cameras live, Kaylin announced. We switched views. Silas was moving through the kitchen, using the flashlight on his phone. He didn't look at the photos on the fridge. He didn't look at the life we had built. He moved with a singular, frantic purpose toward the stairs. He burst into the master bedroom. He went straight to the walk-in closet. He pushed aside my evening gowns, the ones he used to zip up for me, and knelt before the false panel in the wall. He typed in the code, 070719. Our wedding date. The safe beeped. It opened. I held my breath. Silas reached inside, expecting a thick binder of damning financial records. His hand came out holding a single piece of cream-colored stationery. He shone his light on it. I knew exactly what it said, because I had written it 3 hours ago in calligraphy. Too slow. Darling. Silas stared at the note. He flipped it over. Nothing. He checked the safe again, feeling around the empty metal box. Nothing. No, he screamed. The audio was so loud on Kaylin's speakers that it made me jump. No, no, no. He crumpled the note and threw it on the floor. He kicked the closet door, putting a hole in the wood. Where is it? He howled, tearing the clothes off the hangers. He grabbed handfuls of my silk blouses and ripped them. He was unraveling. The cool, collected architect was gone. This was the man beneath the mask, violent, entitled, and weak. He is destroying the crime scene, Kaylin noted dryly, adding vandalism to burglary. Wait, I said, watching the screen. He isn't leaving. Silas stormed out of the bedroom. He didn't go back downstairs. He turned left, down the hallway. My stomach dropped. He is going to the studio. The art studio was the one room in the house Silas had never touched. It was my sanctuary. It was where I painted. A hobby I had kept private. A place where I wasn't a director or a wife, just Hazel. It was filled with canvases I had been working on for years, landscapes of storms, abstracts of confusion and clarity. He kicked the door open. He stood in the center of the room, breathing hard. The beam of his flashlight swept over the easel. The paints, the finished works drying on the racks. He saw them not as art, but as pieces of me. And he wanted to hurt me. He grabbed a palette knife from the table. "Silas, don't," I whispered to the screen, though I knew he couldn't hear me. He slashed the first canvas. It was a painting of the ocean at twilight. The knife tore through the fabric with a terrible ripping sound. He didn't stop there. He went into a frenzy. He knocked over the easel. He took tubes of oil paint and squeezed them over the floor, stomping on them until red and black paste smeared into the hardwood. He grabbed a finished portrait one I had painted of my grandmother and smashed it against the corner of the desk. Breaking the frame, he was screaming the whole time, incoherent curses, blaming me, blaming the world. I watched him destroy the only pure thing I had left in that house. Kaylin looked at me, his hand hovering over the mouse. "Do you want me to call the cops? We can have him picked up right now." I watched Silas panting amidst the ruin of my art. He looked pathetic, small. "No," I said. My voice was hollow. I waited for the tears to come, but my eyes were dry. The grief I expected didn't arrive. Instead, I felt a strange, cold distance. It was a pity. I was watching a man drown in his own toxicity. "Save the footage," I said. "Every second of it." "Hazel, he just trashed your studio," Kaylin said gently. "It is just canvas and wood." "Kaylin," I said. "I can paint again, but he can never undo this. He just gave us the final nail." Silas stood in the wreckage for another minute. Then, the adrenaline seemed to leave him. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. He put his head in his hands. He stayed there for 10 minutes, surrounded by the destruction he had caused. Then, he got up, wiped his face, and left the house. I turned away from the screen. That is burglary in the 2nd degree, criminal mischief in the 1st degree, possession of burglary tools, and we have it in 4K resolution. "He is done," Kaylin agreed. "Not yet," I said. "He is still walking free. I want him to feel the handcuffs click. I want him to feel it in front of everyone he tries to impress." The next morning, I met Trixie at her office. I placed the hard drive on her mahogany desk. "What is this?" she asked, adjusting her glasses. "The feature film," I said. "Silas broke in last night. He destroyed my art studio. He was looking for blackmail material." Trixie plugged it in. She watched the footage in silence. Her jaw tightened as she watched the palette knife rip through the paintings. "That animal," she hissed. "I want to upgrade the filing," I said. "We aren't just doing a contested divorce anymore. I want full criminal charges ready to go." Trixie pulled out a fresh legal pad. She began writing furiously. "We have enough here for a felony indictment, breaking and entering, destruction of property over $5,000, stalking, plus the financial fraud we uncovered. I want the police to execute the warrant at the Phoenix Rising Gala," I said. Trixie stopped writing. She looked up at me over her glasses. "Hazel, that is theatrical, even for me. He loves an audience." "Trixie," I said, leaning back in the leather chair. "He spent our entire marriage performing. I think it is only fair that his final curtain call happens on a stage." "The police usually prefer quiet arrests," Trixie argued. "They won't want to disrupt a charity event." "The captain of the precinct is on the guest list," I countered. "I made a significant donation to the Police Benevolent Association last week, and I have evidence that Silas is a flight risk. He has been moving money to offshore accounts. If they don't grab him when he is contained in that ballroom, he might run." Trixie smiled. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. "You are terrifying, Hazel. I love it." "Draft the complaint," I said. "Time it for 10 o'clock on Saturday. That is when the speeches start." "And what about you?" Trixie asked. "Are you going to be okay standing on that stage knowing what is coming?" "I will be fine," I said. "I have already mourned the man I thought he was. Now I am just taking out the trash." I left Trixie's office and walked out into the bright sunlight of the city. I felt lighter. The house was destroyed. Yes, my art was gone. My bank accounts were frozen. My reputation was tattered. But I was free. I walked to a payphone rare to find, but useful, and dialed Alara's number. He didn't find the report, I said when she answered. He is panicking. He thinks I still have it. Good, Alara said. He texted me this morning. He said he loves me and that Maya is just a business necessity. He is lying to everyone. He broke into my house last night, I told her. He destroyed my paintings. There was a pause on the line. He what? He slashed them with a knife. My God, Alara whispered. He is unhinged. He is dangerous, I corrected. Be careful. Alara, when he realizes he is lost at the gala, he might lash out. Stay close to the security guards. I will be there, Alara said, her voice hardening. And Hazel, I found the transfer codes for the Cayman accounts. I am bringing them. Perfect. I hung up. The players were in position. The evidence was secured. The warrant was being drafted. I went to a boutique on Fifth Avenue. I needed a dress, not a black dress for mourning, not a red dress for vengeance. I chose a dress of pure, shimmering gold. It looked like fire. It looked like a sunrise. It was the color of a phoenix rising from the ashes. Saturday was 2 days away. Silas was probably practicing his smile in the mirror right now, imagining how he would charm the room with Maya on his arm. He had no idea that the floor he was standing on was a trapdoor, and I was holding the lever. The bait was taken. Now, I just had to wait for the snap. The grand ballroom of the Viridia Palace Hotel was a cavern of crystal and velvet, illuminated by chandeliers that cost more than most people earned in a decade. I stood at the top of the marble staircase, looking down at the sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. I was wearing a gold dress. It was a liquid column of sequins that hugged every curve of my body. Catching the light with every breath I took, I did not look like a woman in the throes of a messy divorce. I looked like a deity of retribution. Next to me stood Kalen Thorne. He had traded his leather jacket for a bespoke tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He didn't look like a hacker or a private investigator. He looked like James Bond. If James Bond had a scar above his left eyebrow and eyes that scanned the room for threats rather than martinis. Ready? Kalen asked, offering me his arm. Showtime, I replied. We descended the stairs, heads turned. The murmur of conversation died down, replaced by the rustle of fabric as people shifted to look at us. They had all heard the rumors. They knew Silas had left me. They expected to see a broken woman, perhaps wearing black, perhaps hiding in a corner. Instead, they got a woman who was burning bright enough to blind them. I navigated the room with a smile that was sharp enough to cut glass. I greeted the mayor. I laughed at the jokes of the bank presidents who had frozen my accounts just days before. I played the role of the gracious hostess perfectly, all while my eyes kept darting to the main entrance. At 8 o'clock, he arrived. Silas Sterling walked in like he owned the building. He was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo with a velvet lapel. On his arm was Maya King. She was 23 years old, beautiful in a vacuous way, wearing a silver dress that was fashionable but lacked character. She looked bored. Silas looked triumphant. He scanned the room, soaking in the attention, his hand resting possessively on Maya's lower back. He spotted me. For a second, his step faltered. He hadn't expected the gold dress. He hadn't expected the crowd to be gravitating toward me, but he recovered quickly, plastering on that smarmy, pitying smile he had perfected over the last week. He steered Maya toward me. Hazel, he said, his voice loud enough for the surrounding circle to hear. You look spirited. I am glad you felt up to hosting tonight. I was worried you might cancel, given your condition. He was doing it again, subtle gaslighting in public, painting me as the fragile invalid. I am feeling wonderful. Silas, I said, my voice steady and projected. And Maya, you look lovely. That silver really complements the emptiness of the room. Maya blinked. Not sure if she had been insulted. Silas tightened his grip on her arm. We are just here to support the charity, Silas said through grit teeth. Robert is meeting us here. We have some big news to announce later. I am sure you do, I said. Enjoy the evening. Silas, It is going to be memorable. I turned my back on him before he could respond. It was a calculated insult. I walked toward the stage, Kaylin shadowing me closely. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the double doors. Voices were raised. A security guard was shoved aside. Elara Vance stormed into the ballroom. She was not wearing a gown. She was wearing a sharp red power suit. Her hair was wild, her eyes frantic. She looked like a woman on the edge of a nervous breakdown. "Silas!" she screamed. Her voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling. The music stopped. The chatter ceased. Every eye in the room turned to her. Silas went pale. He dropped Maya's arm as if it were burning. "Security!" he hissed. "Get her out of here!" Elara marched toward him, pointing a manicured finger. "You told me you were coming alone. You told me she was just a business partner." Maya looked at Elara, then at Silas. "Who is she?" "She is nobody," Silas stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "She is a stalker. She is crazy. Security." Two burly guards started to move toward Elara. I caught the eye of the head of security, a man I had hired personally for tonight. I gave a subtle shake of my head. "Let her speak." The guards hesitated. "I am not nobody," Elara yelled, tears streaming down her face. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. "I am the woman you have been sleeping with for 6 months. I am the one you borrowed money from." "Shut up," Silas roared, losing his composure completely. "You are drunk. Get out." Robert King, Silas's boss and Maya's father, stepped out of the crowd. He was a formidable man with white hair and a face like granite. He looked at Silas with confusion and distaste. "Sterling, what is going on here? Who is this woman?" "She is a disgruntled consultant." "Sir?" Silas lied, his voice cracking. "I fired her last week. She is obsessed." I stepped up to the microphone on the stage. The feedback whine cut through the tension. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice calm and commanding. "Please, let's not have a scene. We are here for a good cause. Silas, perhaps you and your guests could settle down. I have a presentation prepared that I think will clear everything up." Silas looked at me, relief flooding his face. He thought I was saving him. He thought I was de-escalating the situation to save the gala's reputation. He assumed I was still the protective wife who would cover up his mess to avoid a scandal. "Yes," Silas said, straightening his jacket. "Let's watch the presentation. Ignore her." He grabbed Maya's hand again, forcing a smile at Robert King. "Just a misunderstanding. Robert, Hazel has a tribute video prepared." I signaled the audiovisual technician in the booth. "I wanted to share a journey with you all tonight," I said into the microphone. "A story about trust, about ambition, and about the hidden costs of success." The massive LED screen behind me flickered to life. Soft, sentimental piano music began to play. A photo appeared on the screen. It was Silas and me on our wedding day. The crowd sighed collectively. Then, another photo. Silas receiving his architecture award. Silas smiled, relaxing. He puffed out his chest. Then, the music distorted. It slowed down, becoming a deep, jarring drone. The screen turned static gray for a second. When the image returned, it was not a photo. It was a spreadsheet. The font was large and crisp. It was titled, "Sterling and Associates, Unauthorized Fund Diversions, Fiscal Year 2025. The room went deadly silent. A red line animated across the screen, tracing a payment of $12,000 from the firm's operating account to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Then another payment, then another. "What is that?" someone whispered in the front row. Silas froze. His smile dropped off his face like wet clay. "Technical difficulties," I said smoothly into the mic. "It seems the file is corrupted, or perhaps corrected." The screen changed again. This time, it wasn't numbers. It was a chat log. The profile picture was clearly Silas. The recipient was Elara Vance. "Silas, I just need to keep Robert happy until the merger. The old man is losing his touch. He is a dinosaur." Elara. "And the daughter?" Silas. "Maya." She is dim-witted but useful. Once I marry her, I will have the controlling stake. Then we can push Robert out to pasture." A collective gasp swept through the room. It sounded like the air being sucked out of an airlock. I looked down from the stage. Robert King's face had turned a shade of purple that was medically concerning. He was staring at the screen, then at Silas, his hands curling into fists. Maya King was reading the screen, her mouth agape, dim-witted but useful. "Turn it off!" Silas screamed. He waved his arms at the booth. "Turn it off! It is fake! She hacked it! It is AI!" The screen changed one last time. It showed a video clip. It was a grainy, black and white night vision. It showed Silas, dressed in black, standing in my art studio. It showed him raising a palette knife and slashing a canvas. It showed him stomping on the paint tubes, his face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated malice. "This," I narrated calmly, "was my husband last night, looking for the evidence you are seeing now. He didn't find it, so he decided to destroy my home instead." Silas looked around the room. He saw the disgust on the faces of the elite. He saw the horror in the eyes of his potential investors. He saw his career incinerating in real time. Maya King turned to him. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She raised her hand and slapped him across the face with a force that echoed through the silent ballroom. It was a sound of finality. "Don't you ever come near me again," she hissed. She turned and walked away, her silver dress flowing behind her like water. Robert King stepped forward. "You are finished, Sterling," he growled. "You are fired, and my lawyers will see you in hell." Silas stood alone in the center of the circle. His carefully constructed life had collapsed in under 2 minutes. He looked up at me on the stage. I looked down at him, my face impassive. The humiliation snapped something inside him. The narcissist cannot handle public shame. He broke. "You bitch!" he screamed. Veins bulged in his neck. "You did this. You ruined everything. I will kill you." He lunged. He sprinted toward the stage, his eyes wild, his hands reaching out as if to strangle me. The crowd shrieked and scattered. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just watched him come, because Kaylin was there. As Silas reached the stairs, Kaylin moved. It was a blur of motion. He didn't punch. He intercepted. He used Silas's own momentum against him. He grabbed Silas's wrist, twisted, and swept his leg. Silas hit the stage floor with a bone-rattling thud. Before he could scramble up, Kaylin had his knee in the center of Silas's back and his arm pinned at a painful angle. Silas was immobilized, his face pressed against the polished wood of the stage, right at my feet. "Stay down," Kaylin said, his voice calm but lethal. I looked out at the crowd. Alara was standing near the exit. She wasn't crying anymore. She was watching with a cold, hard satisfaction. She caught my eye. She gave a single, sharp nod. My phone buzzed in my hand. I glanced at the screen. File received project Aegis/foreign IP _transfer_log.pdf. It was the final nail. The evidence that Silas hadn't just stolen my company's data for personal gain. He had sold it to a foreign competitor. That wasn't just corporate theft. That was economic espionage. That was treason. 2 uniformed police officers, who had been waiting in the wings at my request, stepped onto the stage. They moved toward Silas. Kaylin stepped back, allowing the officers to haul Silas to his feet. He was disheveled, his nose bleeding, his tuxedo torn. He struggled against the cuffs. "She set me up," Silas was screaming, spit flying from his mouth. "She is a criminal. She hacked me. Arrest her. This is entrapment." The officers ignored him. They tightened the cuffs. I walked over to him. The gold dress shimmered. I stood so close I could smell the fear and the expensive cologne coming off him. The room was silent, straining to hear what I would say. I didn't shout. I leaned in close, bringing my lips to his ear, intimate as a lover. "You called me 155 times that night." "Silas," I whispered. My voice was soft. but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. You wanted my attention so badly. Well, you have it. He stared at me, his eyes wide with terror. And just so you know, I continued, I just forwarded the file Alara gave me to the bureau, the one about the foreign sale. You aren't just going to jail for embezzlement. You are going away for treason. I pulled back and looked him in the eye. I only needed one call to the FBI, I said, and I made it 10 minutes ago. Silas's knees buckled. The officers had to hold him up. He looked at me, and for the first time, he truly saw me. Not the wife he could manipulate, not the obstacle, but the architect of his destruction. Take him away, I said to the officers. They dragged him off the stage, his shoes scuffing against the wood. His protests turning into sobbing whimpers. I stood alone in the spotlight. I looked out at the stunned crowd. I apologize for the interruption, I said into the microphone. Please, enjoy the dessert. The chocolate mousse is excellent. I turned and walked off the stage. Kaylin was waiting for me in the shadows of the wing. That was brutal, he said. It was necessary, I replied. Are you okay? He asked. I looked at my hands. They weren't shaking. I looked at the exit where Silas had disappeared. I am hungry, I said. Let's get a burger. We left the ballroom through the back door, leaving the wreckage of Viridia Bay society behind us. The phoenix had risen, and it had burned the whole world down to do it. The arrest was not cinematic in the way Silas would have directed it. There was no slow-motion walk, no tragic musical score. It was ugly, chaotic, and humiliatingly bureaucratic, while the local police had initially detained him for the assault and the break-in. The arrival of the Federal Bureau of Investigation changed the atmosphere in the room instantly. The local officers stepped back, deferring to the suits. Economic espionage was not a matter for the Viridia Bay precinct. It was a matter for national security. I stood near the exit, my gold dress still catching the light. Watching the transition of power, Kaylin stood beside me, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Mrs. Sterling. A special agent approached me. He flashed a badge. Agent Miller. We received the data packet regarding the unauthorized transfer of proprietary algorithms to a foreign entity. We are taking custody of the suspect. He is all yours, I said. They hauled Silas out. He had lost his shoes in the scuffle. His socks were sliding on the marble floor. He looked small. The arrogance that had defined him for 7 years, the armor of the successful architect, had evaporated. As they passed me, Silas lunged against the agent's grip. Hazel, he screamed. It was a guttural, wet sound. Tears were streaming down his face, mixing with the blood from his nose. Hazel, please, tell them it is a mistake. I am your husband. Do something. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had texted me that I was suffocating him, the man who had plotted to put me in a mental institution, the man who had sold my hard work to the highest bidder to pay for his vanity. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. I simply watched him until the automatic doors slid shut, cutting off his voice. The silence that followed was heavy. You okay? Kaylin asked. I am fine, I said, and I was. I felt a strange, hollow lightness, like a fever breaking. I am just ready to go home, or wherever I am staying tonight. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in the systematic destruction of a human life. I did not have to lift a finger. I had simply removed the supports and watched the gravity of Silas's own choices crush him. It started with his career. The Board of Architects convened an emergency session 48 hours after the arrest, based on the evidence of embezzlement and the felony charges. They revoked his license permanently. He could never design a doghouse again, let alone a skyscraper. Sterling and Associates erased him from their website before the ink on the press release was dry. Robert King gave a statement calling Silas a parasitic fraud and announced he was suing Silas for every penny he had stolen. Then came the financial ruin. I sat in Trixie's office, surrounded by boxes of files. Trixie looked like a general surveying a battlefield she had just won. The forensic audit is complete, Trixie said, sliding a document toward me. We have successfully argued innocent spouse relief with the IRS and the creditors because we proved the debts were incurred through fraud and for the benefit of his illicit affairs. You are off the hook. Hazel, the credit card companies, the banks, the loans, they are all attached solely to Silas. And the house, I asked. The equity is frozen pending the civil suits, Trixie explained. But since you are the primary contributor to the mortgage and he used the home equity line of credit fraudulently, the judge is granting you the right to sell. You can liquidate it, take your share of the initial investment, and leave the rest for his creditors to fight over. Good, I said. Sell it. I don't want it. Burn it down for all I care. Just get the value out. There is one more thing, Trixie said, her voice dropping. The sharks. The loan sharks. Word on the street is they are unhappy, Trixie said. Silas owes them nearly $400,000. They can't collect from a man in federal custody. They are making noise. Let them make noise, I said coldly. Silas is safer in a cell than he is on the street. In a way, I saved his life. The personal fallout was quieter, but sharper. My parents flew in from the Midwest. They came to the temporary apartment I was renting. My mother looked 10 years older. My father, usually a man of few words, looked ashen. They sat on the couch, holding cups of tea I had made. The silence was excruciating. They had read the newspapers. They had seen the video of Silas destroying my art. The image of their perfect son-in-law had been replaced by the reality of a monster. We didn't know, my mother whispered, her voice trembling. Hazel, he was so convincing. When he called us, saying you were sick, we believed him. We thought we were helping you. I know, Mom, I said gently. I didn't hate them. They were victims of his charm just as I had been. He was a professional liar. I told you to go back to him, my father said, his voice thick with shame. He wouldn't look me in the eye. I told my own daughter to go back to a man who was robbing her. I am so sorry. Hazel, I failed you. I sat down between them and took their hands. You didn't fail me. You just trusted the wrong person. We all did. But it is over now. He can't hurt us anymore. They cried then. It was a cleansing grief. The death of an illusion. I let them cry. I didn't cry with them. I had no tears left for Silas Sterling. Elara Vance was the loose end I had promised to cut. She met me one last time at a park bench near the river. She looked different. The power suits were gone, replaced by jeans and a leather jacket. She looked younger and tired. Vortex fired me, she said, staring at the water. Gross misconduct, violation of ethics. I am lucky they didn't sue me. You gave me the evidence, I reminded her. That was the deal. No prison. Yeah, she laughed bitterly. I am free, but I am blacklisted. No firm in the city will touch me. I am moving to Chicago, going to start over, maybe manage a retail store, something where I don't have to lie. She turned to look at me. You destroyed him. Hazel, completely. He destroyed himself, I said. I just turned on the lights. He loved you. You know, Elara said suddenly. I looked at her. No, he didn't. He loved what I could do for him. He loved the safety I provided, and he loved the thrill of betraying that safety. That isn't love, Elara. That is parasitism. Elara nodded slowly. You are right. Well, goodbye, Hazel. I hope I never see you again. Likewise, I said. She walked away, a red figure disappearing into the gray city. I felt nothing. She was just a pawn that had been removed from the board. The final act of the physical separation was the house. I went back one last time to oversee the movers. The place felt like a tomb. The walls where our photos had hung were bare, leaving pale rectangular ghosts on the paint. The kitchen where I had cooked that anniversary dinner was sterile. I walked into the art studio. The floor had been cleaned, but the scratches on the hardwood from the palette knife were still there, scars in the grain. I didn't feel nostalgia. I felt like I was walking through a stranger's house. The woman who had lived here, the anxious wife. The woman who checked GPS trackers and made excuses didn't exist anymore. I signed the closing papers on the kitchen island. The new owners were a young couple. They looked at the house with stars in their eyes. They didn't know the history. They didn't know about the screams, the 155 missed calls, the betrayal. "It is a beautiful home," the young woman said. "It is a house," I corrected. "You make it a home. Good luck." I handed over the keys, the digital fobs, and the physical key to the back door and walked out. I got into my car and didn't look in the rearview mirror. I bought a penthouse in the center of the city. It was on the 42nd floor. It was all glass and steel, sharp angles and modern art. It had no garden to maintain, no guest room for visiting in-laws, no garage for a husband's sports car. It was a fortress of solitude. I stood on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. I held a glass of wine. It was a vintage I had bought for myself, with my own money, which no one could touch. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. "This is a collect call from the Metropolitan Federal Detention Center," a robotic voice announced. "From inmate Sterling. To accept the charges. Press 1. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could hang up. I could block the number. That would be the healthy thing to do. But curiosity is a powerful force, and perhaps I needed one final confirmation. I pressed 1. "Hazel." His voice was thin. It sounded tinny and distant. Stripped of all its rich, baritone confidence, it was the voice of a man who had been crying, or screaming, or both. "Hello, Silas," I said. My voice was calm, contrasting with the wind whipping around my balcony. "Hazel, thank God," he breathed. "I didn't think you would answer. Hazel, it is a nightmare here. You have to help me. You have to talk to the lawyers. I can't do it for 20 years. I will die here." "You should have thought about that before you sold state secrets," I said. "I didn't mean to," he pleaded. I was desperate. The sharks were going to kill me. I did it for us, to save us. "Stop," I said. The word was a blade. "Do not insult me with that lie. Silas, you did it for you. You did it because you felt entitled to a life you couldn't afford." Silence on the line. Then, a shift. The pleading vanished, replaced by a confused, pathetic anger. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you do this? Why did you burn it all down? I made a mistake." "Hazel, but we were a team. We were married. Why did you have to destroy me like this? Was it just revenge? Because I slept with her." I looked out at the city. I saw the Obsidian Dynamics Tower in the distance, standing tall and secure. "No, Silas," I said slowly, ensuring every word was recorded on the prison line. "It wasn't just cheating. I could have divorced you for that. I could have forgiven that, maybe, in time." "Then why?" he sobbed. "Because you tried to gaslight me," I said. "You tried to make me think I was crazy. You tried to put me in a mental institution so you could steal my life. You looked me in the eye and told me the sky was green when we both knew it was blue." I took a sip of wine. "You didn't just betray my heart. Silas, you insulted my intelligence. You thought I was stupid enough to believe your lies. You thought you could outsmart me." I paused. "I can accept being unloved," I said. "But I will never, ever accept being treated like a fool. That was your crime. You underestimated me. Hazel, please. Goodbye. Silas, enjoy the silence. I know I will." I ended the call. I stared at the phone for a moment. Then, I blocked the number. I walked back inside the penthouse. The air conditioning was cool and crisp. The silence was absolute. There were no vibrations on the table, no frantic notifications, no lies waiting to be discovered. I had fallen from the illusion of a perfect marriage. Yes, it had been a long, hard drop, but I hadn't hit the bottom. I had learned to fly. The fall was his. I was just watching from the clouds. The gavel did not make a thunderous sound when it finally fell. It was a sharp, wooden click, like the snapping of a dry twig. "The defendant is sentenced to 8 years in a federal correctional facility," the judge said. His voice was boring, monotone, the voice of a man who had seen 1,000 men like Silas Sterling and would see 1,000 more. Restitution to the victims is set at $2 million. I sat in the back row of the courtroom. I was wearing a white suit. White is the color of mourning in some cultures, but for me, it was the color of a blank page, a fresh start. Silas did not look at me. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that washed out his complexion, making him look jaundiced and frail. His hair, once his pride, was shaved close to his skull. He looked older than his 37 years. He looked like a building that had been condemned. As the marshals led him away, he paused for a fraction of a second. He turned his head toward the gallery. He wasn't looking for his parents. They hadn't come. He wasn't looking for Alara. She was long gone. He was looking for me. Our eyes met across the mahogany railing. There was no hate in his gaze anymore. There was no arrogance. There was only a terrifying emptiness. He was a ghost who had not yet realized he was dead. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply watched him disappear through the side door. It was over. The legal war, the depositions, the forensic audits, the media circus, it was all finally, irrevocably over. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright sunlight of a Viridia Bay spring. The air smelled of cherry blossoms and exhaust fumes. It smelled like freedom. 6 months later, I stood in my new office at Obsidian Dynamics. The plaque on the door no longer read Director of Risk Analysis. It read Hazel Ravenswood, Vice President of Operations. The promotion had been unanimous. After I had exposed the vulnerability in our system and the traitor who had exploited it, the board of directors didn't fire me. They promoted me. They realized that I was the only person in the company who had been tested by fire and came out holding the flamethrower. My new office was on the top floor. The view was panoramic. I could see the harbor, the bridges, and the sprawling grid of the city. Somewhere down there, in the concrete maze, was the penthouse I now called home. Somewhere else was the federal prison where inmate number 7429 was currently eating lunch on a metal tray. My assistant, a sharp young man named Leo, who was terrified of me in the most productive way possible, knocked on the door. "Ms. Ravenswood." "Come in, Leo. A package arrived for you," he said, placing a thick manila envelope on my glass desk. It was hand-delivered. The courier said it was from a legal firm representing Mr. Sterling. I stiffened. Even after a year, the name had the power to make my muscles tense. "Thank you, Leo. That will be all." He left, closing the door softly. I stared at the envelope. It was heavy. Silas was in prison. He had no assets. He had no leverage. What could he possibly have to say to me now? I picked up my letter opener. A silver dagger Kaylin had given me as a joke gift for my promotion, and sliced the seal. Inside was a single leather-bound notebook and a typed letter on the stationery of a cheap criminal defense lawyer. I read the letter first. Ms. Ravenswood, my client, Mr. Sterling, requested that this be delivered to you 1 year after his sentencing. He said it was the only inheritance he had left to give. He claimed you are the only person who would understand the data. I pushed the letter aside and picked up the notebook. It was old. The leather was cracked. I opened it. The handwriting was Silas's, but it wasn't the looping, artistic script he used for anniversary cards. It was shorthand, precise, jagged, hasty. I began to read. Entry 1, October 14th, 2018. Target acquired. Hazel Ravenswood. Position Senior Analyst. Obsidian Dynamics. Objective long-term infiltration. Handler instructions. Marry her. The firewall is too strong for an external hack. We need a physical key. She is the key. I stopped breathing. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. I flipped the page. Entry 50. She is guarded, emotionally distant. It is taking longer than expected to secure the proposal. I have to play the role of the devoted admirer. It is exhausting. She talks about integrity constantly. I have to mirror her values to gain access. I flipped another page. Entry 200. The wedding is set. I have access to her home network, but she keeps the work files air-gapped. I need to be patient. The sharks are getting impatient. But I told them this is a 7-year play. The payout will be worth the wait. I read through the years. Our honeymoon in Bali. A cover for him to meet with a contact in Jakarta. The time he supported me when my grandmother died. A calculated move to deepen my emotional dependency so I wouldn't notice he was cloning my hard drive. Every memory I had, every moment of tenderness, every fight, every reconciliation, it was all documented in this notebook as a tactical maneuver. I reached the final entry. It was dated the day before he sent the "Don't call me" text. Entry. Final. I am suffocating. The role is too hard to maintain. I hate her. Not because she is a bad wife, but because she is so undeniably good. Her morality is a mirror, and I can't stand looking at my own reflection in it anymore. I am going to sabotage the mission. I don't care about the data anymore. I just want out. I closed the notebook. I sat there in the silence of my vice presidential office, and I waited for the pain to hit me. I waited for the crushing realization that the last 7 years of my life had been a lie. I waited to feel used, violated, foolish, but the pain didn't come. Instead, a strange, warm sensation spread through my chest. It started as a spark and grew into a flame of pure relief. For a year, a small part of me had wondered, was it my fault? Did I drive him away? Was I too cold? Too focused on work? This notebook was the answer. It wasn't me. It was never me. I hadn't failed at marriage. I had been the target of a highly sophisticated, decade-long corporate espionage operation. The intuition I had felt, the nagging sense that something was off, the suspicion that led me to check the GPS that night wasn't paranoia. It was my subconscious recognizing the enemy. He hadn't broken my heart. He had tried to hack my soul, and he had failed. I stood up and walked to the shredder in the corner. I thought about feeding the notebook into the teeth of the machine. No, that was too bureaucratic. I picked up the notebook and the silver lighter I kept on my desk for lighting scented candles. I walked into the private bathroom attached to my office. I dropped the notebook into the ceramic sink. I flicked the lighter. The flame danced, yellow and blue. Target lost. Silas, I whispered. I touched the flame to the dry, brittle pages. The paper caught instantly. I watched the ink curl and blacken. I watched the words, target, objective, and handler turn into ash. I watched the history of my marriage disintegrate into smoke that smelled of burnt leather and old lies. I washed the ashes down the drain. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were clear. My skin was glowing. I looked like a woman who had just survived a shipwreck and found herself on an island full of fruit. I went back to my desk and checked the time. It was 7 o'clock. I had a date. The Blue Note was a jazz club in the basement of a historic building in the Old Quarter. It was dark, intimate, and smelled of bourbon and wood polish. A saxophone player was pouring his soul out on the small stage, the notes hanging in the air like smoke rings. Kalen was waiting for me at a booth in the back. He stood up when he saw me. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo or a leather jacket tonight. He was wearing a simple black button-down shirt and jeans. He looked relaxed. The tension that used to live in his shoulders, the hunter's vigilance, had softened. "Vice President," he greeted me, a teasing smile playing on his lips. "Consultant," I replied, sliding into the booth. We ordered drinks, a scotch for him, a glass of red wine for me. We didn't talk about business. We didn't talk about Silas. We talked about jazz. We talked about art. I had started painting again, renting a small studio in the arts district. Kalen had started restoring vintage motorcycles. Our relationship was not a whirlwind romance. It wasn't the passionate, consuming fire I had thought I had with Silas. It was a slow burn. It was quiet. It was built on the solid ground of mutual respect and shared trauma. We were two veterans of a war, finding peace in the demilitarized zone. Halfway through his drink, Kalen looked at me. His expression turned serious. "I heard about the package," he said. I wasn't surprised. Kalen still had his sources. Leo talks too much. Leo worships you, Kaylin corrected. He was worried it might be a bomb. It wasn't a bomb, I said, swirling the wine in my glass. It was a confession. He admitted everything. The marriage was a sham. He was a spy for a syndicate trying to get into Obsidian. Kaylin whistled low. So, the sociopath defense wasn't far off. No, I said. Kaylin leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. He looked deep into my eyes, searching for cracks. How do you feel? He asked. And don't give me the corporate answer. I feel validated, I said honestly. I feel like I finally have the missing piece of the puzzle. It makes sense now. Kaylin, why was he always so perfect, yet so distant? Why he never wanted to talk about his childhood? He was playing a character. And you? Kaylin asked. Do you feel like you wasted 7 years? No, I said. I learned how strong I am. I learned that my gut instinct is sharper than any algorithm my company can design. That is not a waste. That is training. Kaylin smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. You are terrifying. Hazel Ravenswood. I try. He took a sip of his scotch, then set the glass down. Can I ask you something? Something I have wondered since that night on the stage. Anything. Do you ever regret it? He asked softly. Do you ever regret not picking up the phone, not opening the door? If you had forgiven him after those 155 calls, you might still be in that big house. You might be living a lie, but it would be a comfortable lie. Do you regret burning it all down? I looked at him, then I looked around the club. I saw couples laughing, friends toasting. I felt the vibration of the bass in the floorboards. I thought about the house in Viridia Bay. It was beautiful. Yes, but it was cold. It was a museum of life, not life itself. I thought about the 155 missed calls, the panic, the desperation. Then I thought about my penthouse, the silence of my mornings, the coffee I drank on the balcony, looking at a horizon that belonged only to me. I thought about the power I felt walking into a boardroom, knowing that I had faced a monster and won. I smiled. It wasn't the polite smile of a wife. It wasn't the predatory smile of a revenger. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. It was radiant. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I placed it on the table between us. Screen up. It was black, silent. There were no notifications. No desperate texts. No missed calls from a man trying to manipulate me. No alerts from a security system warning of an intruder. Just the time, 7:45, and the background image a photo of my latest painting, a canvas full of bright, chaotic, beautiful colors. Look at that. Kaylin, I said, pointing at the screen. What am I looking at? He asked. 0, I said. 0 missed calls. I looked up at him, and I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost physical. 155 missed calls was the price of betrayal, I said, my voice steady and sure against the backdrop of the jazz music. But this free silence, it is priceless. I don't need anyone to walk me home anymore. I am my own shelter. Kaylin raised his glass. To the shelter. To the shelter, I whispered, clinking my glass against his. The saxophone swelled to a crescendo, a high, triumphant note that held for a long moment before resolving into a peaceful chord. I drank my wine, checked my phone one last time, and then turned it face down on the table. I didn't need to look at it. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey of betrayal, revenge, and finally, liberation. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from the busy streets of New York, the quiet countryside of England, or somewhere halfway across the world? Please leave a comment below and let's get a conversation started. And if you enjoyed Hazel's journey, please subscribe to Crimson Drama Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who might need a reminder that they too can be their own shelter. Thank you for your support.